So I was under the impression that Luke was going to go do this right away, but he has not yet. So here I am, and I saw Luke streaming from his own channel, and he was talking about proselytizing. And I kind of followed, like, I didn't have a chance to follow the entire thing. I know that there was kind of like some um, chatter about that, and that Luke had like done something on it recently. I saw little bits and pieces of it. But I didn't follow the whole thing. It's something that I've been thinking about too. Hopefully he'll get in here and talk to me. Come on, Luke, where are you? You jumped off so that we could talk. Come on. Oh, I hate, absolutely hate being on camera by myself and talking. It just is so unnatural. I love talking to people, but oh, Lance, oh, no big deal. Yeah, I don't even. It wasn't even a planned thing. So I mean, obviously the party itself was planned. I'd invited friends over, but the idea of like streaming it was like, it was basically what happened was I decided that I wanted to see Sherry. And so I was like, oh, if I'm gonna set up an iPad so that I can say hi to Sherry during the party, it's like, well, she could just live stream it. It's so, I mean, did not everybody else have the impression that Luke was like jumping off right away to first I waited to see if he would create the stream, and then he didn't. And so I just did it, and then I figured, oh, maybe he'll get the clue, and then come on. I've got a class that starts at 7, which is in about like a little bit less than an hour from now. Oh, okay. I missed that part. Okay. Well, when he's when he's done his business, then he'll probably hopefully he'll realize that I've already started it, and I'm also streaming this to his channel too. So because he started it on his channel, so I wanted to make sure that we included it. So I just okay. Let's see. Let me think. So I actually was thinking about this independently of Luke's stream about it, of the proselytizing thing, because I love Hezi so much. I really do. He's so smart, and he's such a good guy. But if I'm being really honest, the entire Noahide thing bugs the shit out of me. I really don't like it. And there's something that's like, it's so obviously foreign and Christian, and it's a very late development historically. It's in Judaism, like the whole Noahide thing really only goes back to the 1860s. And I mean, I know that there were some like historical precedents, like in the classical age, and when Maimonides was active, there was like some, but it's like, for the most part, like it's just completely alien behavior for Judaism. And then and I'm bugged by the fact that like it's intentionally, some of it really is intentionally targeting Christians, people who would naturally be Christians. And I mean, I know we kind of have it coming, so karmically it's warranted. But at the same time, it bothers me, and I think I think I can talk to this, because this is the thing that I very much, where I practice or don't practice, in this case, what I preach. It's like, there is no part of me that ever is trying to proselytize my wife. There is no part of me that is ever trying to proselytize my Jewish friends.
Is that because you don't love them, though, Nate?
No, I do love them, and I'm perfectly happy for them to remain Jewish. First of all, like, when it comes, for Christians, when it comes to Christians thinking about Jews, we really can't think of Jews as belonging to an other religion. We really have to. Judaism falls into another category, and the principle of honor thy father and thy mother kind of applies when Christians are thinking about how we should relate to Jews. It's like, no, it's like they're like we're related to them in a way that is so close that we really can't think of them as an other religion, and it would never. I would never ever, and for whatever reason, in God's plan, Judaism has continued concurrently with Christianity in history.
Yep.
God has some purpose in that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to claim to know what it is, but I know that nothing that God has ever said about the Jews is negated because
Yeah.
it's the word of God. So why would it be negated?
I think
So
that it's all part of the grand universal redemption. Like the more that I listen to our Jewish friends and like Hezi and things, it's so that at maybe at like another fullness of time, at another future Kairos moment, everything will come together because of the way that
well,
it
did you hear that
has
this whole thing
evolved.
started with me talking about like how like the proselytizing thing, not only the fact that you were talking about it in context of orthodoxy the other day, but I was also talking about like I saw Hezzy's conversation with Christian, and I love Hezzy so much.
You're
Like
right.
I don't
Same.
get to. He's somebody that I would love to talk to so much more than I get a chance to. Like I would have him on Grill Country all the time if it were possible. There was
Same.
no.
In like a very Neil kind of way, Hezi is one of those people that I deeply and profoundly want to be long-term friends with and hang out with in real
Yeah, right,
life.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, but I don't like the Noahide thing at all. And I would tell him that. I'm like, this is not a thing I would. This is something I say to Hezzy's face. It's like I don't like the Noahide thing. It's like kind of like it's just this weirdly Christian thing that really is alien to Judaism, and I don't understand like what's going on with it. I really don't.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. I don't think I understand it well enough to really give an opinion on it, but it's like it almost seems like a like a blurry way to lose the distinction and particularities between things. Like I think we can maintain those while having a unity.
yeah,
What do you think about this comment? Was PVK proselytizing to T-Grog in yesterday's stream? Did you see
I don't.
PVK talking about T-Grog?
No, I don't. I didn't catch that,
So in
so I can't
PVK's
comment.
stream, he was almost like happy manic. It was really fun because PVK was just like
So, so
he
this
was
is like so this is what I started to I didn't I was so busy with the work that I didn't have the time, but this is what I was going to chime in when you were talking about it, is that I wanted to draw a distinction, and I think that you would agree. I'm pretty sure that you would agree with this.
okay.
You should spread the gospel all the time. That is not the same thing as proselytizing. And the difference is this: when you're proselytizing someone, you are actively trying to coerce them with your will and get them to agree to your propositions and to conform to your worldview, and that's evil. It's unambiguously evil. It's not good at all.
Yeah.
But if you declare the gospel and you show the gospel in your life, then people will then you are showing something beautiful, which creates a natural attraction, and people will come to it on their own, and you trust God to lead them to it.
Yeah, because the gospel is not, I mean, this is where you and I would probably because the gospel is not merely or even primarily propositional.
Right.
I mean, it is. That's
You know,
part
it's
of it.
funny. It's funny. You
But
know, it's so funny. This is okay. This is hilarious because you're going to think this is John Vervaeke, but this is Maximus. This is for passage
uh-oh.
for. This is the passage I was reading for the class that I have at 7:00, which Wayne is in too, by the way. And I saw Wayne was in your chat. Uh, the word of Scripture recognizes that knowledge of divine realities is twofold. On the one hand, there is relative knowledge based on reasoning and concepts, and lacking the actual perception of what is known through experience. And it is this knowledge that we use to order our affairs in this present life. On the other hand, there is knowledge that is true and properly so called, which is gained only by actual experience. without reasoning and concepts, and provides by grace through participation a whole perception of the one who is known. By this latter knowledge, we attain in the future rest the supernatural divinization that is actualized unceasingly. They say, moreover, that relative knowledge based on reasoning and ideas can motivate our desire for the participative knowledge acquired through active engagement. They also say that this active experiential knowledge, which by participation furnishes the direct perception of what is known, negates the relative knowledge based on reasoning and ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
He's talking about participative knowing.
Well, and Nate, the reason is it's so interesting because like I don't even like saying this, but it's true. Like I'm trying to make a commitment to, instead of just like defaulting to media and YouTube and stuff when I wake up in the morning, I'm trying to do prayer and scripture readings and lives of the saints and the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. And the scripture reading for today was from the Gospel of John. And the end of the scripture reading says, I don't know, there's a lot of, I mean, this is a synchronicity, but it says like, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is righteous because I do not seek my own will, but the will of my Father who sent me. And I was talking to this guy yesterday about this too. And we were talking about like this, he was bringing up talking and how people talk a lot, which is very much within the like propositional reason, ego, what I would call egoic knowing mode. But the integral inner voice that you really only know probably through listening, and then when it has no separation with the doing, like that is integrity, where there is no separation between the thinking and the reasoning and the doing. It's just you hear and you do. Like it's one act.
Well, do you remember how right? Yeah. Well, hearing and doing, and also knowing and seeing.
Yeah.
Which is also that's also definitely a participative kind of knowing. That's why I opened that conversation on participation that I had with Jordan Daniel Wood and John Vervaeke and Sam. That's why I opened by asking for John Vervaeke, like, what kind of knowing was involved in the transfiguration? Because it's clear that like it wasn't propositional. Because if it were, then they wouldn't. How did they know who the two guys were? They didn't have to ask. They didn't have to go, "Hey Jesus, who are these two guys standing here with you?" They knew it was Moses and Elijah.
They just saw it.
The seeing and the knowing were one.
Yep. Well, that's kind of there. Oh, I'm gonna blank on the guy's name now. I've been talking to him. He's not a big TLCer, but he reached out to me at some point, and I've had like lots of conversations with him offline, just like in Signal.
Right.
And he was saying, "What is that verse that like we now see by faith, but later we'll see by sight?" Like that's and faith is belief in things unseen, but someday we will know by sight.
Yeah.
Like what you're talking about.
Yep. Hey Lance, good to see you, man.
Good morning.
Hey guy.
I think this is such a good conversation.
It's a really good conversation.
Because this is like at the heart, if we're trying to come through to have good faith conversation, if we're trying to have dialogos, even thinking even John Vervaeke's conversation, everything else, it's the difference between having conversation in disagreement without being a proselytizer. I mean, because this is so big, because what it feels like to people, and I know what this feels like because I can say this is me. When I hear something that I don't agree with, I feel like I'm being proselytized, like you're trying to convert me. It's just the way it is. And we live in this very binary either or. I'm a lawyer. All this art. My mom said I came out of the womb arguing, right? So, but like the thing that, I was thinking a lot about your live stream last night, Luke, that you started off with this whole situation. And so the fact of the matter is, I put, I'm a recovering proselytizer, right? I definitely have been a converter, but then the difference is like another thing that people have always told me that what I am is I'm an exhorter. Like I am someone who's excited about things and I get passionate about them. Like if I find a new band and I think you're going to like it, Luke, I'm going to, like in the old days, I'd go buy a CD. I'd drive it by your house because I saw there's an opening act. You don't know about them yet. I'm like, dude, I want you to hear this, those sorts of things. And so, the thing for me that I'm just trying to lay underneath this, I have this very specific place where I participate what I believe is not proselytizing, and it's 12-step recovery. I think at the bottom of this, the God of your own understanding does this amazing thing that allows people to talk about a lot of it. Like there is so much disagreement, dude, when you're sitting in a 12-step meeting, like how people are talking about God, or their resources they're reading that are leading them to God, or the things that they're doing in their own personal time. You have people that are doing Buddhist meditations, they're doing liturgical, the Book of Common Hours, they're using portions of the big book as their, like, it's all over the place, dude. But yet when I sit in that place, like I am so cool with anybody talking about anything. It's really weird. Like, you know what I mean? Like I go to that place and I don't have this sense that I have, to do that. So like, because Luke, you make it very explicit, and so do you, Nate. You don't want Hezi to be, I mean, you don't have this deep desire for Hezi to become Anglican Christian.
No,
Like,
no,
you don't
whatsoever.
I don't want Paul to leave that corner of that church in Sacramento. Like I would be so, I mean, if he did it for retirement reasons or whatever, but like if Paul were to do a live stream and say, yeah, I'm going to leave my church of these people I've pastored for 30 years in this corner, and I'm going to go join the Orthodox church down the street. I'll tell you honestly, I'd be devastated. I'd be a bit devastated.
Yeah.
So
I want to throw one more thing in. I'm going to shut up. You know what here's the other thing I was ruminating on, Nate. And I think, what another thing that allows me to not be such a proselytizer is apokatastasis. See, Robert Perry does this wonderful, like he did did these talks on it or whatever. But then he went through and talked about there were Calvinist apokatastasis people, there are Lutheran apokatastasis people, there are Orthodox apokatastasis people, there are non-denominational apokatastasis people. When you get the whole sense of the ultimate reconciliation that I think we're all persuaded it's going to happen, that totally frees up some of the proselytizing. So I'll be quiet. I just wanted to throw that stuff out.
Lance, I mean, what you said there, it's like there's a way in which, like, what you were just talking about is definitely related to this concept of like meta modern Christianity, whatever that is, and we don't know what it is yet because whatever it is still happening. But the church is changing, and that's like and that's one of the things that's going on is that like Christians are not like. Their practice is not like limited within their own. It's not really as limited within their own traditional denominational boundaries. They are in fact including things from other Christian traditions within their practice and within their worship. I mean, it's like, there are lots of Orthodox people who are praying the Rosary, for example. Heck, there's Protestants that have picked it up.
Right. Oh man. So this is what's good and hard about conversations, and how I would love to like illustrate and point out to people that while both you guys were talking, I think I was able to keep track simultaneously while listening to you of about 4 points that I wanted to make and about a couple that were disagreements. And I was telling my wife, I think somewhat that's why I'm able to do live streams somewhat well, is because I can simultaneously talk to people while monitoring a chat and like holding a list of thoughts that I want to share.
Yeah, I can't do that at
all. So like a few things, like to persuade, my understanding of the Greek, to persuade is to convince oneself. It's like essentially to have integrity. And so like when one is sharing their faith or sharing the gospel, you're essentially saying, like, if this resonates to you, if deep calls to deep, and if you are persuaded yourself integrally by what I am saying, great. If not, let it go, because you can't control it. It's the apokatastasis thing. Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Okay. I didn't want to. I will just say this. I'll make it really simple, and you'll know this is true the minute I say it. What's the most persuasive thing in the world? Love. Love is the most persuasive thing in the world. So if you really want to persuade people, love them, which is what you're supposed to be doing anyway.
Right. There was a great. I actually want to go find it, Lance. There's just so much gold in these scripture readings. I can't even, like, I was reading it from my wife. Where did it come from? But it was essentially like oh no, it popped up on YouTube or something. But there was some saint that said this morning, and I'm not going to remember it. Shoot. But he said, like, basically, oh no, it was in this OCA, like, scripture reading thing. And it said, there was a quote. And it said, like, when you are trying to, okay, how to read the Bible, and it's by Callistos Ware. But there's a section there where he quotes a saint. It's so fantastic. Sorry, I really want to find the Bible, or find the verse, because it's good. Because he says essentially, like, convince. I'm not gonna be able to find it, so that'll be awkward. But he says, like, when you read the Bible, you need to read it personally, and it's not like what does it say, but what does it say for me? Like, how does this apply to me? And then also, there's some saint that says when you read the Bible, don't say, like, what you shouldn't say, like, what does this mean for my brother or for the other person? It's like, what does it mean for me?
Yeah.
Like, don't always be taking the Bible and, like, trying to outward it and fix everybody else, like, fix yourself. Take the log out of your own eye.
That's actually like that's actually like quite a traditional way of reading, is to, like, put yourself into what you're reading.
I even loved, like, Jeremy. Didn't he say that yesterday on the stream? He was quoting another saint, but someone came to the saint and said, and, like, asked their forgiveness or something, and then the saint just started praying, like, something like essentially that Jesus prayed, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. And he's like, no, I asked for forgiveness. But, like, the saint saw forgiving the other one is so tied with his own sin. It was like an explanation of what it means when we say, like, with St. Paul, like, I chief of sinners. It's that, like, all sin is really rooted in your own. It's almost like the Dostoevsky thing. Like, if I were what I was supposed to be, if I was obedient and aligned with God the way that I supposed to be, that would take care of your sin too. It's like love covers a multitude of sins,
So this is I think this is actually interesting here, because so why are we talking about proselytizing as opposed to evangelizing, and do you think they're different? Because I do think that they're different, because proselytizing is about the making of disciples, and evangelizing is just about the proclamation of gospel.
Yeah, and am I wrong in thinking, like, evangelizing is you see that more, like, used, I don't know, almost like with the definition, but that's almost like converting someone to Christianity, where proselytizing has this wide, I mean, I guess we take the word make thing. Proselytizing is you trying to convert someone over to your ideas. And I think it's like, the other thing is like, we also need to give each other grace to some extent. Like, in some way, if I'm persuaded about something, so for example, like, let's go to the apokatastasis things. Like, I do think that some things that some people believe and what that says about who God the Father is and who we are, like, I think those things are so big, like, because I think we're here because of the meaning crisis, right? I think a lot of people have rejected the God that I would reject also.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, we have to be able to speak. And so that's why I think our story is so important. And the God of your understanding. Well, how do you get the God of your understanding? You get it through experience, and you get it through participation and revelation.
And you know what, Lance? Here's the thing we need to remember. Like, what is the root cause? Everyone's bad idea of God, where did that come from? It came from people. They got that idea from other people. Like that, it didn't like it it's that's where they got. It's because of the way. It's because of like damaging things that they were taught by people or damaging ways they were treated by people, like their impression of their impression of God, that is, you know, a false impression of God that we would also not believe in. It came through people. But you know what? So does the right one.
Yeah.
So does the right one. And that's how this is how you actually evangelize. This is how you actually spread the gospel, is by showing people the image of the right image of God. And the way you do that is through you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the ways too, I want to throw this in because this popped up while you guys were talking, is it's related to, I think, Peterson's pay attention to when you feel weak, but it's also what I was thinking of is fear, like fear in these kinds of conversations, like either, and a lot of times anger is fear. A lot of times when you're angry at something, it's fear, but really try to pay attention to your motivations and to what's going on in your own heart when you're talking about these things, because they're all gateways, I think, to your intention and your integration. Because I think when you're truly evangelizing, it's just gonna be love, like what you were saying. There's gonna be no fear because you're just talking about what you love, and that's what letting the cards fall where they may means, is like you're letting go of control. It doesn't matter how you respond to it. It doesn't matter what other people think about it. You're just overflowing with this love of what you find to be true, good, and beautiful. And there's no there the anxiety around how someone's going to respond to that, or if they're going to accept it, or if they're going to come into your camp, is fear.
You know what? People get mad at you when you're actually doing that, Luke. They really do. Like, I don't know if I want to talk about this or not. Are you aware of how much Jacob thinks that we are dangerous, you and I?
Oh, I think he said, well, I've been talking to Emily a little bit, and so I think I know a little bit about
And
it from X.
the root of that is that because we do not sufficiently hate the people we're supposed to hate.
Yeah, it's like he said something on X, like we TLC needs to get better at just like shutting up the people who are wrong, or stop platforming the people who are wrong. Like
us.
Maybe this guy. I don't know, not Lance so much. People just
Lance. I think Lance. I think Lance. I don't know. Lance is more likable in some ways, I guess. Lance doesn't get the level of heat.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what is it?
I actually got so. I mean, it's like I actually finally I had to mute him on Twitter. I just like for my mental health. I really did. It's just like, you know.
So what is it? Like, I know you and I both get like really fired up. Like we get really animated, and you can get combative.
Yeah, Neil can join, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna probably be going a little bit now because I have kids waking up pretty quick. But like,
maybe Lance can keep this going because I gotta go soon too because I got a class.
I don't know. I would love it if people want to put this in the comments or whatever. I don't know, because I would love to be aware of this blindness that I have of like why I piss people off. I don't get it. Like I feel like I'm pretty chill. Maybe it's my first percentile politeness. Maybe it's that I say things so strongly.
That's actually, so here's the thing. It's your openness and your chillness that is making the people that are mad at you mad.
Well, it's being able to hold too, Luke. Like you are passionate. You're passionate, and but you're also poking people in a lot of like their worldview. You know what I mean? Like you're really poking at some very
See, that's
sensitive
the thing. Like
places.
people say I'm really open, and that I don't. But I speak against what I don't like pretty clearly, obviously. So like, what do you want me to do? Isn't that what I'm doing? It's just not speaking against the right thing.
You're not hating the right things because
right. Exactly.
You know, and you deserve to be booted out of the Peterson sphere, which I hate that, by the way. First of all, anyone in TLC who insists on referring to the Peterson sphere of TLC, they're doing that as a declaration of war against essentially me and Luke.
Yeah, and and the other thing, Luke, let's just think of one of your most famous firestorm is the POS, right? The POS theology, piece of shit theology, and that really hit people, and the firestorm that created. But that's something you really believe because you lived it. Like, you were excommunicated because of it. It was causing you deep. That's part of your trauma, was a part of that, right? So that's part of your story. But at the same time, like, here's the other thing. Like, if anybody spent any time listening to you, like, you don't want Michael Sartiori to stop doing his house church. You don't want Paul to leave CRC. Like, you don't just say that, like, you mean that. So people need to say, okay, he's not trying to or you don't want Jeff P to leave his church. You love Jeff P. Michael Lady, you don't want Nate to leave the Anglican church. Like, you've never wanted that, nor tried to communicate about that. But you're very passionate, but the stuff you talk about pokes people right in the heart of their propositions, and it feels very uncomfortable to people.
I mean, do I want people to stop playing the game of zero-sum winners and losers conversionist via propositional tyranny? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
do
here's
want
another
people to stop doing
thing,
that.
Luke, think about this. A lot of people have a material are in this corner. I'm going to say this, and they rail against the materialist frame, yet they are living within a Christian materialist frame and they can't see it.
No, oh man, I have a lot of thoughts about that because I completely agree with you, but I'm going to go. All right. See you guys. Thank you. Love
Do you
you
want
all.
this to go on? I'll keep it open a little
Yeah,
bit. Do you
keep
want to
rolling.
jump
Yeah,
on?
keep it going. Keep it going. I think it's a good conversation. I've got a little bit more time before I have to go. I want to have at least time to. I'm not going to wait until the 0 hour because I need time to refill my coffee and get my Zoom link fired up and all that for my class.
Neil and Gavin, join in. What are we proselytizing?
So I think if I'm to interpret I'm going to try to interpret Jacob as, let's say, benevolently as I can. And what I think he is concerned about is that if we become the cool kids, then the fringe becomes the center. And I think an automatic bias that we have in this space is that most people are like us, or that it's good to be like us, in that, like, most of us are top quartile, maybe top 10th openness. And we are, let's say, fringe cases for good reasons over the course of our life, our personalities, but also our experiences. And most people are, I mean, it's the reason that orthodoxy, I think, is PBK talks about this, is coming back in such vogue, is that people are hungry for something substantial, solid, let's say firm, that they can stand on, right? And I think what many of us are doing are swimming in, combination of fresh and salt waters. And that's something that I think Jacob fears, that people will permanently think this is the cool thing to do, to swim in the ambiguity of things, rather than choose a faith tradition and plant your feet solidly on that 2,000 or 3,000 or however old that tradition is. So that's my sense of it.
I want to just agree with Neil, and then toss in the idea that some people may go to the Peterson sphere, and that'll be very good for them. And so thank God for the Peterson sphere. So I don't think we should talk bad about it, but yeah, they're all good.
No, it's not that. It's not. I don't like the way that the term is used. It's just because it's used to deliberately to draw a distinction. It's like they don't want to say TLC. They want to say Peterson sphere to just so that they can, even though they're part of TLC, they want to be like, we're not part of that part of TLC.
Yeah.
So they're trying to draw a distinction, and
Yeah,
so that's why it bothers me. I'm not saying it's like. I mean, I probably am. Abby made a comment and was in the comments saying like she doesn't see me or Lucas particularly Peterson adjacent, and I would say that's probably I mean, I like Jordan, like some of what he says, but I probably am like less Peterson adjacent than most people.
Yeah, it's good for like each religion thinks that their religion's right and their favorite historical figure is the best, and maybe it's good to have all this diversity where people get to know God better. They just call him by different names. So
Definitely.
I don't see it being bad.
Yeah.
There is a tension in this space between, let's say, the solid and graspable and embodied. Like in some way, shape, or form, all of our liturgical practices, let's say, or faith traditions are somewhat. This is going to sound strange, but they're somewhat left brain in that they are. You have to choose them, and you have to voluntarily like subordinate your own individuality to this tradition to go into it, and I think we all recognize that that's necessary to sort of subordinate your own individuality to something higher or better. But even though the whole purpose of liturgy, I think, is to lose yourself in that liturgy, it's still a left brain choice, I would say, to sort of like subordinate yourself to it. And I think the other tension in this space, which I think is a good one, and it's the crazy high and openness people that we have in here, is like the intuited, the received, the things that are coming in from outside that are still valuable, that are not part of the liturgy. And to say like, I think that's the tension, right? So you have the 2,000-year-old tradition that we say is really important, and then simultaneously we have these things that are being mined that are valuable from the outside, and we're trusting the hive mind or whatever you want to call it to sort the wheat from the chaff. And some people are going to think most of that is chaff, and some people are going to think most of it's wheat. And Jacob, I think, is and folks like him are in the realistic position, and this is the pragmatist in me. Most of it is chaff, because most stuff that comes out of the now gets sorted out through history and time as not useful and counterproductive. And so like we need, because we're so high in openness, we need those slicers, those swordsmen, to constantly be testing and slicing and figuring out what's good and what's not. And so I see it being like, if we're only winsome, there are going to be bad consequences.
That's not my problem with it, Neil. That's not my problem. I have no problem with that. Like, I have no problem if Jacob wants to get on a live stream and disagree vehemently and stand for something else. That's fine. It's the fact that he's taken it to the level of personal attack that bothers me.
I see. Yes.
And it's like, don't pretend to view me as a friend when you've gotten to that level of animosity where you're like basically like you're using a public platform to throw shade at me when you haven't even bothered to engage me directly. But he doesn't engage me directly.
Nate,
he doesn't.
Right. But Nate, this is an opportunity for you to be a Christian. Sorry, this is weird, but we only have the opportunity to actually be Christian when injustice happens. That's the only opportunity that because otherwise we're just normal people. What separates Christians from normal good people is when injustice happens, we respond differently. Now, like when the rubber hits the road, and this is my terror of God, like when the rubber hits the road, how will I respond? Because anyway, so I like right now. So in New Orleans, I'll give you an example of this. So in New Orleans right now, the Catholic Church is really struggling, and this is all public knowledge, this stuff that I'll say. So there's about 14, 15 churches that are closing, and my church is being forcibly merged with another one. And both of our churches that we're being merged with are not like doing terribly. So there's a lot of kind of anger and animosity about that. And there are people who grew up in the church the entire time, and they say, why is my church being taken away? And it's domicide, right? But my response to those people who are saying like we're being unjustly treated, why is my church being taken away? My response to them is like, it's not like our Lord and Savior was unjustly, subjected to the worst possible punishment possible without lifting a finger to stop them. It's not like the center of our faith is based around you will suffer injustice and here's your proper response to it. So it's like all these people who are Christian, they practice their entire life being Christian, and then something really bad happens to them, and then we see if they're Christian. And like
Question.
I don't know. They're oblivious to this. They're oblivious. Like I say this to them, and they're like, "How can you?" I'm like, I get frustrated,
Can I ask you a quick,
and then I have to remind myself that I cannot be frustrated about their frustration or my.
Sandy's wanting to ask you something, Neil.
Oh, just to clarify, you said what you're describing is not the center of our tradition. You just said something about you're Catholic. Is that specifically in your experience? Because in evangelicalism, it seems like die to Christ, you die with Christ, die to your faith, to yourself, die, like a lot of death and pain images fling around in the evangelical places I was.
Well, I'm saying what separates Christians from other people, I would say, is that we have the expectation that our lives are going to end poorly in injustice, and the eschaton is not going to be immanentized in our life in any way, shape, or form. Because I don't know how to interpret I don't know how to interpret the crucifixion any other way. Like
Well, you do know there's a lot of megachurches that are full of people that don't think that, Neil.
No, but this is my point, Nate. When I'm having the discussion with other Christians who are so focused on the injustice of having their church taken away.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, no, I don't feel like there's any. I mean, honestly, I don't like. It's just like I didn't even engage. I finally had to mute him because I just didn't want to look at it anymore. It's just like I don't know why he's doing it.
Yep.
And I just don't want to look at it anymore. And I don't want to look at it anymore because I don't want to feel negative emotions toward him. So it's just like, it's better just to not see it. And then the next time I see him in person, we can have a friendly conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think to be specific, Nate hasn't said this. So one of the things that happened, and this was about a year ago or whatever, is he literally, not literally, because he called him demonic and meant it in the full sense of the word.
Yeah. He live streamed on Twitter calling me Satan and Malek.
Yeah, so and I had the conversation with him. Like, I'm like, dude, that so crosses the bounds to take that. It's such a deeply personal, awful thing to say about someone, particularly someone like Nate. I mean, you can disagree with him, but that's where it had kind of crossed the line. And Nate, actually, this is a wisdom step for me. Anything that affects my spiritual condition to a level that it's bringing up resentment and anger and so on and so forth, I need to cut that out of my life. Now, it's not that someone's poking you a little bit and makes you uncomfortable. You need to the world's going to do that. So you got to learn those skills. But no, there is this thing, and this is actually a wisdom step. That which takes away your serenity, you need to cut that thing out. And so, like, sometimes at some point, it's not like you happened one time and you disengaged, but it's a very good wisdom step to quite frankly say, okay, I'm not going to participate in this thing anymore because it's stealing my serenity. It's forcing me into, and the thing is like, there's really going to be no common ground between you and Jacob. Aren't going to find any real common ground around some of those things because you've tried for so long. And at some point, it's okay to just disengage and say, we don't see things the same way.
Yeah.
And
I actually have to go. I have to go because I got my class coming up. But please keep it going, Lance.
And I say that though, I still followed. Like for me, he didn't call me a demon, so I still follow. But I still follow Jacob.
I'm not. Yeah. People should follow Jacob. Jacob does a lot of cool stuff. And I don't have anything against Jacob. Yeah. I just don't want to see him throwing me under the bus in public spaces anymore. So I muted him.
And I would say this on the other side, which is like, I mean, what we're doing right now, Jacob started this. Jacob is driven around the country to meet people in person because he loves a lot and he loves these people. And so
he's not lukewarm.
No, he's very particular. He's irascible. He loves that. I mean, that's part of kind of who he is. And he's a great opponent processor. And so, all those things are there. And everyone knows this. He knows this about himself. And by the way, Jacob would not shy away. If he was watching, I'd love to come in. He firmly believes that Nate's demonic.
Can I ask a quick question before you leave,
And
Nate?
with that, okay, yeah, go ahead, very quick.
I jumped on because you were talking about proselytizing. And I tried to catch up, and I got about 7 minutes out, and I never got there. And I jump on, and you're talking about Jacob. Was the proselytizing conversation because of why you're talking about Jacob, or was it unrelated to that? And you just switched
It just kind of came up in the flow of conversation. It has nothing to do with what we started this conversation about.
Okay.
And I don't remember what the bridge was.
Okay.
Honestly. Yep, that's it. I gotta go. Bye-bye.
So
Hey,
what are you
Lance.
talking
Hey,
about?
Sandy.
Hey.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, do I want to talk?
Well, I kind of want to go back to, I think the topic before proselytizing, which was, let me see if I can remember this.
This is what I'm doing.
The nothingness beyond
Yes.
God.
I'm supposed to be reading. I'm taking a Vervaeke course.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and I'm behind on that too.
There we go. So what were you saying there, Neil?
Yeah, but before proselytizing, well, no. This was in the proselytizing vein. We were talking about the difference between proselytizing and, let's say, engaging, or I forget the exact word, but then Nate summed it up by love, in that if you really want to change someone's hearts, the right way to do it is through love.
Well, and you guys were also talking about why you weren't talking about evangelizing when you were talking about proselytizing.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious about.
Yeah, I think probably people use those the same way, and I think evangelizing was spurs it's a Christian term, the evangelion, Christ's victory, right? So it was there was this, it was very much tied to that. Now, I think if we would take it in a modern context and update the dictionary, I bet it would look a lot more like proselytizing now, wouldn't you guys think? Like, I think it's probably fairly synonymous in how it's been adopted into the culture. So, because both of them, I actually looked up in the dictionary, both of them are, what it's trying to do is convert someone into your own ideas or convert someone into Christianity. It's about trying to get someone to change themselves to be more like the thing that you're trying to talk about. I mean, and that's such a fine thing, like we talked about here, which is, I do think that, like, we have to be honest, like, in ourselves, like, clearly, if we believe something and we're passionate about it and it's working for us, for example, like, when you're sharing that, there's some sense of you that you would want someone to potentially experience that, right? But what's at the bottom of your core? I can just speak for myself. There have been times when I've talked to people. I'll just say this in a Christian context. There are times when I was talking to people, I was trying to convert them into Christianity. Like, I know that's what I was doing. Like, there was, whatever. There are other times when I'm talking to people that I'm not trying to convert them into Christianity. But so I think there's this fine line.
So I told Nate I wanted to jump in. I basically wrote, I wanted to talk about it because I'm a proselyte. And I didn't define it. But that is, I looked because I thought, what is that word? Why don't we use that word more often, and why that word compared to other words, right? And it means a new convert. And so basically that's how I feel here. I'm like super out of the loop. I'm way behind on the culture and the language. I'm taking a course with somebody on a subject that I took one philosophy course, and I haven't taken psychology or religion since 1980, maybe. So I'm relearning everything. And that's kind of where the word was pointing me. So I'm curious how that word and what the whole concept, because to me, when you talk about evangelizing, I'm one of these people that, because I have a deaf autistic kid, I'm always like, what does that mean? How do I explain that? How do I have to, shape that so that it conveys meaning? And so it's simply spreading of good news, basically. we contextualize it. But basically, that's, if you look at the meaning of the word, that's what it means. Same with proselytizing, because it says it came from the noun, a new convert, in whatever century that was. And therefore it now means, so what do you do with a new convert? And how do you pull somebody into wanting to be a convert to whatever, and how do you engage them? And that puts me in mind of my course yesterday, and my son, who is, 30 years into me trying to do all the steps, the whatever they mean for some of the things I worked with him with, to create who he is and his ability to communicate 30 some odd years after the fact. Does it really mean that, or is that just curiosity running rampant in my head?
I think what the reason watching Luke talk about this on his live streams, and then what we talked about earlier, you might have missed it, Sandy, is that I think why it's important to him is, like, so we're coming in here to have dialogos, right? We're coming in here to talk about things. And there's a difference between disagreement, where you honestly can disagree with someone and be okay leaving them to their own way of thinking, but also opponent processing, versus this other thing is like, are you coming on here trying to convert everyone into your way of thinking? And so, but that's such a difficult thing. Like, I catch myself, like, so I'm thinking about these things. I know these distinctions, but in any given live stream, Neil, I went back and I was watching myself, and sometimes I totally wasn't being a proselytizer, but then I can catch myself and I'm like, I think you were proselytizing at this during this 10 minutes, Lance. So within the same live stream, the divided man in me is having a good dialogos. And then usually it's like something's hit me in some place and then I want to respond. And so it's a very difficult thing. So I think Luke's trying to uncover, because I think also a lot of people. So a lot of people, when his heart is trying to have a conversation, and he totally in his heart feels as if he's not trying to proselytize people. And then he mentioned, for example, Tayo come on, and he wants to talk to Tayo about this. He said Luke is proselytizing about not being a proselytizer. And so he's like, well, wait a minute, I wasn't trying to proselytize, yet you're accusing me of this thing that I don't think I was doing. And to be honest with you, he probably wasn't. And then he kind of was or something. Okay. So it's a very difficult thing.
That's my point. That's why I asked the question. That's why I brought up the course I'm taking and my son, who's deaf, autistic, and has communication issues. And what is one of the main reasons I'm taking this course with a billion words I don't understand to begin with. Before a word exists, there's something about it. We create words. I looked it up yesterday because I don't know all these words. CBC Canada was talking about deaf people in STEM. This sounds completely unrelated to proselytizing. But when deaf people wanted to go to university and study STEM courses, back in the day, there weren't all these things that provided them with the access. So in a sense, to me, in one sense, I'm looking at this, I got really excited yesterday because I'm a visual tactile thinker, and I looked it up and I went, oh my God. People are talking about ontology. They're going like this. I can see it. Oh shoot, I know what that means. You take the sum of the world, the things you can touch, and you kind of come in, study, learn, come in and out looking at it. And I'm like, I've been trying for a year and a half hanging out here. Every time it gets used, I have to look up the dictionary again because I can't seem to place it into that place where I'm describing myself as a proselyte, whatever that word is. I'm a learner. That's what I'm saying. I am a learner. I love questions. Because I am a learner, I am able to teach my son to be a learner. And that's what you're saying Luke's problem is. He's so much of a learner that he's instinctively teaching people how to learn from how he has learned, and he doesn't know he's doing it. If you simply throw me out of the place I'm talking right now, back into the church context, I suck at evangelism. I do not I don't evangelize. The only person I know that I ever brought to Christ was my sister, because she didn't tell me that she was spying on me for the first year I was a Christian, and decided she would base her decision the next year on what she saw. She told me 30 years after the fact. Now I'm studying Noahide stuff, because for my whole time in church, I hung out in the Old Testament. I'm wanting to know, what are these things? I'm hearing people pull a verse here and chuck a verse there, and they're telling me they all mean things, but there is an entire storyline drawn out from beginning to end of those books that I want to see and touch. I want to put my hands on them. I'm a proselyte. I'm a learner. I want to know, but I don't want to evangelize people. I suck at it. And when I realized I suck at it, I realized that half of it was intentional, because I don't like what it means. And that's what you guys are talking about. I don't want to rip somebody out of a context. I want to help them find their context. That's the difference with what I did with my son. He stockpiled signs and words, 200 plus by the time he was 3. He's 37. He's finally starting to push me for questions. He tormented me all Easter weekend with this thing, wanting to know what diarrhea was, and looking up every single reference thing he could figure out and framing questions with his hands. That's not because I taught him that at 3.
He's building a map. Yeah.
He's building a map. He is a map maker. He has been. That was math and maths were our first language with him. Math and maps, because I could see that's what he thought. Yes, he's making a map.
Well, words are what you're getting at, Sandy, is that words are symbolic, and the nature of symbols is that they're approximations and not. And so the best way to get a better understanding of something through approximations is through a variety of approximations, through different perspectives. And I think that's the reason why there are 4 gospels, for instance. But yeah, so this hit me recently, that words are inherently treated as true or false, like cold, wet. And then if it's qualitative, we say very cold or very wet or very like, and but it's not, it's an approximation when we sometimes treat it as and maybe what I'm also hitting at here is Luke's dislike of confessionalism. We treat all these things as like we have full understanding. Like yes, yeah, like it's fully yes, and more of like we're trying to get a better understanding.
Yeah. Well, and I want to show something. So T-Grog does this, which is, hasn't anyone discussed that Jesus allegedly said, "Go into all nations and preach the gospel"? I think that's what people think that the Great Commission said. That's not what it says. It says, "Therefore go and make disciples." Right? There's no preaching in this. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them
all that you have
your learning thing, all they commanded. So what does that mean? Paul went to cities, for example, and hung out with these people for 2 or 3 years, right? Showing them, getting to know them, teaching them. That's not to go preach a gospel message to people and let them hear the gospel message. No, go and make disciples. And disciples are deep one-on-one relationships, right? What did he do with them? He said, "Come follow me." He didn't say, "Here, read this thing about me." He said, "No, come follow me," right? And then they spent time with him. So I would just say, to me, that's also what we're talking about a lot here, which is, it's about participation. It's about relationship, right? It's about spending time with someone. It's not talking about thinky-talky things or preaching a certain idea or whatever. Jesus was never about that. He never told someone, pray this prayer. He said, "No, come follow me, taste and see, come and see." These sorts of things, right? It was active. It was participatory.
Yeah, no, he taught him specific things too, Lance. He taught him an exact prayer called Our Father.
Well, yeah. So, but it's not an either or, Neil. It's not an either or, right?
Correct.
And so,
yep.
So,
that's right. But all of these ways of knowing have their place, right? All of these ways.
Sure, but it was lived, it was embodied, it was all the things, right? So
what I said to Chad, I said this to Chad, and what Chad did 2 days ago, or yeah, I think it was 2 days ago now, going into that other flotilla, I said to him, I will be amazed if TLC still exists in 2 to 3 years. I will be amazed if we're not doing that on the regular. And what I mean by that is, like, if we believe in this place, if we believe it's good, like those two things, right? We believe it's good. Not even if we believe it's good, then do we have a responsibility to share this place with other people who don't know about it? And then to your point, Lance, how do we proselytize sharing with other people? So here's how Chad did it. And I had this epiphany. The movie Fight Club. So after they have a strong cohort of, like, let's say, culture within the group, Brad Pitt deliberately gets beat up. And then he says, all right, here's your homework assignment. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to go out in your normal life, and I want you to start a fight with someone, and I want you to lose deliberately. He doesn't say deliberately, but he says, I want you to start a fight, and I want you to lose. And what I realized Chad was doing, it's not deliberately losing. He's going in, and he's just being one of the guys. And he's not trying to get anything. So whenever Luke's talking about mammon, I'm defining mammon as you're trying to get something, and that's proselytizing. You're trying to get that person to something from, like, to the extent you're trying to get something, it's not going to work, straight up. To the extent you're loving, then it works. And that's the future of this place, as I see it, is that this place, we're gonna go out.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's just crass, but it makes the point. Like, are you a friend with someone just to be a friend with someone, or are you just trying to get into their pants spiritually and convert them? And if they won't convert, are you just going to abandon them? I mean, seriously, like that. There's this sense about that. And so the other thing is like, I think it's everything. Like, some of it will be, if you think there are people that would like what is going on here, invite them in, hey, you should check this out, or whatever, you share it and invite them into the community. And then the other ways that you can take this out, which is you start living out the things that we're learning in here. Like, I've taken ways of being and ways of thinking that I then hopefully exhibit. I start exhibiting TLC, like conversational wisdom, and how I'm just relating with people. I'm not even telling them I'm doing a TLC thing, if that makes sense, right? And hopefully you're taking some of these embodied things we're learning here, and you're actually living them out in your relationships that can bring some sort of healing, like learning to have a good conversation with someone, like even realizing this proselytizing thing now and bringing it to the top of our brains. What this has done for me is, like, it brings the rule of perspicuity, like it's at the top of my head now. So if I catch myself in a relationship where I'm trying to proselytize someone or convert someone versus just trying to understand them and love them and be where they are, you know what I mean? Like, I can take these things out, and I can take the light of TLC out without even telling people about the TLC. That's another way that we can spread the message here, right, Neil, is how we're communicating with other people. And then they'll like, wait a minute, dude, you're talking about these things in such a weird way, compared to how I'm saying, what's going on with you? And you're like, well, hey, I hang out in this little place, and we're having these conversations, and so anyway.
Yeah. So what you're describing, Lance. So Matthew Parlato got on their stream, and he started going on Vervaeke Speak, and I'm just sitting there going, oh man, it was going so well. Chad did so well. Tayo did so well, and now Matthew Parlato just came on, and he's going like all Vervaeke, wonderful. And then and I was dreading it as it was going, and within 5 minutes, Parlato had them loving him like, oh, he did so well, like he did, and I was so happy. Like, I was like, man, Parlato comes into this blue collar stream wearing like this yellow vest in like an Amazon warehouse, or I don't know where he was, but he's like very blue collar, normal guy, like, and Parlato was like doing this dance where they would hit him, and he would just kind of fade back and then come forward gently, and just oh man, he was so good. I was in such admiration of him in that moment. And it was like all this training that we've been doing in this dojo for the last few years. It's like we get out into the real world, we test our mettle in reality, and we see what happens. And I'm just watching these guys like Tayo and Parlato go in and tangle it with these random dudes, and getting thrown into the furnace, so to speak, and coming out glorious. I loved it. It was so good. So anyway, Chad's got a really quick, like 20 minutes, but there's another clip that's floating around the Broken Clock Tower Discord.
I think this shepherdess comment is so good. This is very, very hard for me. I struggle with this. I'm a problem solver, right? And so I struggle with this because when I'm hearing things, I'm trying to solve problems or whatever, but it's so freeing to actually just listen to the person in front of us, to try to understand them and not try to fix them in some way. God, it's so wise, but that is so freaking hard to do. It comes more naturally for others. So I think some people who are nurturers by nature have that ability to listen more naturally and really feel and have empathy and care for the person in front of them. But I think that's a heart of it.
Tunji, what do you got?
Tunji, yeah, Tunji.
Good to see you, Neil. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Lance. I have a couple of things in mind. One is the saying of Paul, I wish everybody would be like me, except for my chain. And I cannot say that I am as confident as Paul, but I share the same hope that he has, that is the eternal hope of resurrection, that I wish everybody has in Jesus Christ. So that is a foundational truth. It's that's one thing, and it's a wish. It's Paul says that he wishes that that would be the case. And then we have to recognize the limit of the space where we are on the internet, because I am a big fan of the show don't tell kind of approach to evangelism, especially in the way that you live a good life, and then people ask you, hey, why are you doing these good things? Why are you reacting in such a way to this and that? And then you explain, yeah, it's because of Jesus, and because Jesus loves me. That's why I am like the way I am. But on the internet, and I have no way to show you the way I live. I can only jump on a conversation and say something, and and then it comes to the way that I interact and the respectful manner that we can have discussion. But I cannot I cannot put my action, my internal being into words in here. So it's gonna be a compromise of evangelizing. It's gonna be a compromise of proselytizing and anything like that. And then I was something that I noticed. I should have noticed early when I first came to the live stream, is that this is a place with a lot of trauma. It's a lot of maybe even spiritual trauma, they say, where if you are attentive, I wasn't that attentive at the beginning, you realize that people come with different baggage, with different hurt that come from churches or mentors or families, and you can get to the conversation completely unaware, and you say things that are completely normal for you, and you find a reaction in the other person that is, whoa, it was strange. It was beyond your idea of a natural response to a simple idea. And that's because we have to get better to acknowledge that it's not about rational argument, or it's not just about rational argument. It's about the hurt that is in the inside of us when we speak about those topics. I mean, there are things that bothers me and fires me up when and I want to say something, I want to respond, but maybe the same thing is not bothering at all other people. And at the same time, this is weird. It remains weird to me. How is that things that is so painful for me do not bother completely my brothers or this other person over there? And I have to make the effort to see, okay, then maybe it is also the other way around. The things that is not bothering me is bothering the other people when I say something nonchalantly. And but it is, yeah, it is the part that require efforts, require times and learning, require patience, and require to getting hurt and endure for a while, and yeah, do not give up. So that's the good part of that is possible. So in a virtual space to have. Also, there was something that bothers me about Luke. I wanted to, anyway, I wanted to respond
I
to Luke.
apologize. I have to. Yeah, I have to go into my daughter's. I'm at my daughter's dance competition, which is an all-day thing. I got. She's got a dance coming up. I'll see
Thanks,
you guys.
Neil.
Thanks,
You'll
Jimmy,
free
for
up.
sharing.
You'll free up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And but the vulnerability, the safety in this place of sharing vulnerability that you're talking about, Tunji, I think it's one of the most important, essential things that makes this place what it is. So, yeah, I agree. Bye, guys.
And continue, Tuji, like, because I think Luke's totally fine with this. He's trying to explore, like you said, there was something that he said that bothered you. What was that?
Yeah, he hit me and maybe also Abby with some etymological bullshit in the chat. He has this you say colpi di coda with he puts some comment afterthought. He come up with things like suffering is the meaning of suffering is undergoing, is to undergo, and this is exactly etymological bullshit. When you pick something that you know exactly what it is by experience in life, and then you disconnect with what the other person is saying, and then you put your intellectual understanding to it to discount and devalue actual reality. So that was bad, but okay. This is part of the things that hurt, and then you get over it. Then there are the other aspect of things that are more doctrinal, theological, let's say. I'm not a universalist, and I have no problem talking to universalists. It's interesting, but the more I talk, maybe the more I realize that I disagree more and more. That's fine. That's not a problem. But then there is the aspect that, going back to the traumatic thing, that you see that there are implications to one doctrine that are really offensive to your idea of God, but the same things are not offensive to others. So I don't know, it's difficult to reconcile such things, and I want to trust more some biblical kind of wisdom and discernment when it comes to it. This is what I think is the right approach to see if according to Scripture and the Church and anything that has any authority, that things is it's beneficial, it's good, and it's right or not. But that is another argument. It overlaps with the problem of trauma. It overlaps with the problem of how do we deal with with different people being bothered by different things.
So what I was going to say might relate to that. I belong to a couple of writers groups. I've maybe since 2013, and I started out writing poetry, and now I'm trying to write memoir. And so we'll get together and you read pieces of what you've written. And one of the things that I ran into there, and actually from my music teacher, who was also a journalist, was talking about needing to leave spaces for people to breathe, and how like light or dark the things you write are, you know, how are they going to impact people, you know, and what the pattern should be for a good storyline, which also is kind of what would be a nice pattern for a conversation here. And it really perplexed me because I'm writing about some difficult things, but I was trying very intentionally to write carefully about them, you know, in both poetry and prose. And people would keep saying to me, "That's so dark." And I'd go, "I'm sorry. I have no, like, how did I do that?" Because I kept feeling like it was being offensive because it was really dark. It was very heavy, right? And that was one of the things that my music teacher said was, when you go into journalism, you learn, you start, you know, with something that's, you know, like moderately heavy, like you balance. It's about taking things through here. And I'm hearing some of that in how you're describing how the conversations go, and the after comments. You don't have an opportunity to, you know, respond. They just kind of drop it on you and leave it on you and walk away. Those kind of things. And what I learned in the process was that I didn't realize the way the weights in my world worked. Like if we were putting them down, so as I was trying to be fair to others and balance them in a way they could be comfortable, I didn't realize the ways in which my life and the experiences that I have been through have changed my perception, perhaps, of how the weights are actually weighted. To me, when I would share something light, it's halfway down there. The other person's, I can't cope with this scale on the other side because it's super heavy to them, you know, and I'm hearing elements of that in what you're talking about in terms of suffering and things that people say. And people can say, and not just what they say, but how they say it. When I would talk about some of the really hard stuff in my life, people would say at church. So putting it into a context where you brought up, or Lance brought up, sometimes even religious trauma can happen. You know, it's the place where things mess with our head, but also our heart. Because they'd say to me, "Well, you know, God never gives you more than you can handle." And that would just hit me like a sucker punch, because I'd be thinking, why the hell would you say that to me? I just told you this, and your response is, God never gives you more than you can handle. And eventually I got angry, and I would start saying back to them, well, then he has far too high an opinion of me. Like, if what you're saying is true, and you're not just being a real smartass, then he obviously thinks I can handle way more than you're willing to handle when I ask if you want some of it, you know? And I'm hearing you speak, and I'm thinking, this man knows something. He's probably telling us about maybe an eighth to a quarter of what he knows about what he's thinking at best. And all the rest of it is the story. You know, when you said, I can't show you my life, I can't show you how I walk it out. How do I live it? How do I do all these things? I'm thinking there's probably a very important story there. We're all sitting here with our facial expressions going every which direction. And you're just kind of sitting there, just calm face, taking it all in, like turning it around, letting it, you know, do its thing. And yeah. And I'm like, there's something there. There really is. And that makes me want to hear.
Yeah, I think that's why there's this, like Tunji, just listening to you, that's why Paul has this deep sense, along with Van Donk and others, that in-person estuary is really important, because that's where the rubber hits the road. You see someone like locally and you start sharing life and you get to see these things. So, because for example, I can say that I'm fine, and I can say I'm fine over the phone or whatever, but when someone really knows me and I say I'm fine, they're like, oh no, you're not fine. You find this like in 12-step kind of recovery groups. And I think there is a limit to what can. I think this is good to see people thinking through things, modeling this kind of conversation. Clearly there's a draw to it, but another thing that's happening here, Tunji, which is I have made connections with people off the YouTube where we've gotten into relationship, and there are people that are they're trying to get themselves into recovery, so we can have conversations about that. Like, I clearly try to say, hey, go connect with a group in your location, right? Because you need that in-person sort of thing. But I think, but in some ways, though, when you sacrifice your time and you devote into someone, you are able to show, even if you're not in the same city, how you live your life by how you start building a relationship and caring for someone and taking time out of your day and everything else, and making out space for people. So I think there are ways that we can, in this community, try and just get off the YouTube, and we can kind of get in some real relationship. But I don't disagree with, and that it's the reason why Jonathan Pajot says go to church. It's the reason why Paul Vanderklay says go to church. Paul's not telling you to go to a CCRNA church. Jonathan Pajot's not even telling you to go to an Orthodox church. They're like, no, go insert yourself into a community and start living this thing. Because it's in those spaces and places, Tunji, where you can connect, right? And start to, and then when you're in that place, and if you get really close, particularly if they could know your family and everything else, like, then people really can see, how are you really living this stuff? Like, you talk a good game, but are you walking it?
Yeah, PVK says a place where you love and be loved. That's the central aspect of our life. It can only be embodied. I said that immediately. The first thing that I said when I came to live stream is, I'm here because I could not be in person in another situation. Otherwise, I will keep encouraging people to get off the internet and go visit a friend, go visit a grandpa, a grandma, go visit a sister and brothers, take a trip, go to church even if it's not Sunday, check people what they're doing in the prayer meeting, or if there are Bible studying available, go participate. You will find the treasure for your life there that is irreplaceable, and then possibly you will experience true communion at some point. That is most important. Yeah, and then there is another. I think it's for me is one of the most central topic of the meaning crisis. I will drop a bomb here. You hear it first. The central dilemma of the meaning crisis, and the new atheist and post new atheist word is not the discussion about the existence of God. I think that is never been an issue. Maybe just slightly in a small portion of people, in a very little portion of time in the history of mankind, somebody has really doubted about the existence of God. But the real question that every person asks and is wrestling with is God good? That is the question where everybody, atheist, Christian, and every religion wonder, and that's what's need to be answered somehow in everyone's life. Is God good? And that's what the things that it made the realization that the answer was yes for me. That was the things that give me life, and in every sense of the word, in the immediate sense, gave me life, and in the eternal sense, that's the hope of eternal life and resurrection. It's because I find out through faith that God is in fact good. And, yeah. And,
I do think that's fundamental. Peter Kreeft, who I really like, he I was listening to something of his, and he said that is, and he was a philosophy professor too, and was talking about Platonic forms and those sorts of things, and the development of thought. And at the end of the day, like you have these forms, but it doesn't tell you if God is good, right? And then ultimately, the Christian story ultimately is, yes, he is, and not only is he good, but you're made in his image, right? And that it's the completion of this precursor, this foreshadowing, this thing, and kind of the fulfillment. And I think if you listen to any of these deconstruction stories, I think that's fundamentally at the core of a lot of it. Also, in the 12-step spiritual programs, there's a chapter called We Agnostics right before you get into, they give people the steps. And one of the things that you will see if you sit in those groups very often is a lot of people come in with a conception of God. They've had trauma, they've been hurt. There are a lot of I would just say this: there were a lot of angry Catholics that would come in and were angry at that sort of situation. But it happened in all contexts. I think if you know Sandy's story, she's been traumatized by the church in certain things that happened, right? Luke's story has been traumatized by the church and being excommunicated because he was asking difficult questions. Sam's story includes traumatization of the church, right? Because he keeps getting excommunicated from certain groups or so on and so forth. And so, one of the things that I like about what the 12-step process is it, and Paul had this on one of those videos of what Chad shared, is it's trying to get people to move past that and get into a mode of participation and an openness to let God disclose to himself who he is. However, AA does put a frame around God. It doesn't tell you who God is or anything, but here's the frame that you approach God, that he's a loving God. And the keystone that they try to get people to open up to is that he is the Father and you are the child, like you are a child of God, right? And so there is this simple starting point where they try to get you to start from, which as you're building your own conception of God, it's answering the question of, why don't you approach God as if God is good? Start there and then start doing these things, then he'll disclose himself to you. So that thing you talked about there, Tunji, like, I think that's at the very heart of a lot of what we see.
I'm thinking of something my first trauma counselor said, and I've said it before, but I took a hiatus from church for a few years, and it was secular counseling. I don't know if she had any beliefs at all, but she didn't really kind of give any idea if she did or didn't. But when I came in the day I told her I wasn't going to church, I couldn't keep going to church. I couldn't heal while I was going to church. I couldn't do that. And she asked me a couple of questions, and she said, so tell me about what that means and what does that look like, And I, gave her a little rundown, and she said, oh, good. I would be asking you very different questions if you told me you had stopped believing in God, because God is so very important to you. And I would be way more worried about you if you had stopped God than that you've stopped church.
Good morning, Christian.
Hey guys, I've not got a lot of time, but I was thinking back to just the earlier conversation. I've missed a lot of it when the difference between the words proselytize and evangelize, and I was thinking about the like evangelism is about like the good news, I think, like evangelion or whatever, like the good news. And I do think there was someone maybe said something like proselytize was about ideas and like
That was me. Yeah, I looked up in the dictionary. I'm not smart.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy way to that's what it got me thinking about, was the difference between those two words. And just like Tunji was saying, that like the idea of the good news, like to tell, like there's lots of ways to tell people things, you know? And he was talking about with your life, and the way that what hit me right before I was about to get on was just like, what am I trying to do? And what is the spirit of what like I've experienced is kind of like, you know, I've got a 7-year-old son, and when he was in like kindergarten, I was worried for him in preschool. He didn't seem to know how to play with friends very well, and I think there's several reasons for that. He was pretty premature. He's very sensitive, and there's some of it was COVID. Like he's 7, so 4 years ago he was, or 3 years ago he was 4 and 5. That developmental stage, really isolated. So I think he's late. And the thing that I keep encouraging him is like, did you play with your friends today? Did you play with your friends today? And like approaching this with a spirit of whatever this is, and trying to keep that as the spirit. And it seems like that may be what Chad's trying to do, and Teo is like, let's go play with these people. I mean, I don't know. And that's good. Like play is good, and you have a good story for people to come play in my story. And that's that whole arc thing is like, let's tell a better story. So, all right, I've got a appointment, but
I'll just say quick to you, Christian, my homework from the trauma therapist, figure out who you are, what you love, break all the stupid rules. Don't drive through stop signs, just break the stupid rules.
Yeah.
And play big. Play.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sandy, it's nice to see you. And Tunji, Lance, we'll see you guys around.
Yeah, I want to share something. And if you're someone who's in therapy or counseling, this is not saying to don't do that, because I've done those things. I'm also not a mental health professional, so I just want to say this out loud. So this isn't either or. I'm not saying this, but there's this book by Dr. Timothy Petitsis called The Ethics of Beauty. It's a massive book. It's something else. But what he was trying to, at the heart, when he was trying to work on what are ethics, and he's trying to combat rational ethics versus an ethics of beauty. And he's Orthodox, so he was talking about some of the Orthodox things, but he used the trauma of men coming back from war as the backdrop of how he was going to work his way through this. And he had met with this guy who had spent a lot of time with Vietnam War veterans, and what they had found in the statistics was that actually just talking about it, talk therapy, was not producing the results that they needed. And then they went back and they looked at, so then he juxtaposes it as like what happened in the Orthodox Church when men would come back from war. And what they really found is that they slowly reintroduce them back in, they understood even if you were on the right side, that there was going to be massive trauma you were going to experience. And so they very slowly, and so there actually was a period of time where they didn't take communion. It was intentional about that. It's not like that. So, but what they realized is that they tried to bring the person back into community. So to make sure that they were attending the festivals and the dinners, and that you were bringing you back, because there's this isolation that happens in trauma. There's this otherness. There's this intense sense that you need to isolate. You feel unworthy, like there's all this stuff, and it's real things. And so over time, what they found that healed people and then bring them in was to bring them in the communion, in the union of the community, and to embrace them. And that through getting back into that pattern of that participation, that was the best way to kind of heal. And I think one of the things that we talk about here a lot is, and this is Grimm's whole project around here, Virtually Not Alone, right? Is that a lot of people are also hungry here that have meaning crises or whatever, particularly is they're hungry for community, because there's this deep sense that you need to be connected with your fellow human beings, right? And so, I think that kind of goes back a little bit to what you were talking about, Tunji, where we can talk about things here, but you had this deep sense that community was so important. You know what I mean? Like the community and being able to be in, with someone, or so on and so forth. And the other thing, it goes back, I think Emily's had some great comments along the way here, but about how dealing with people in trauma, or so on and so forth, or how do I communicate with people? Like sometimes people aren't going to be ready to come into a church right away. Like us as Christians, like it's okay to just love your friend. And then you can love them with the light of Christ. Like you can love them with all the principles, and you don't even have to use the word Jesus or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can just be there for them and just be the Christ in their life. And over time, it might take years, but over time, they'll ask you, like they'll invite you in, because they'll know you are, right? If you're sharing your story, you'll talk about things that are happening to you in church or your prayer life or whatever. That thing happens on, but you're just telling your story and you're listening to theirs. Over time, they then invite you in. Like if you spend long enough and it's their time or whatever, if you stay in step with the Spirit, like there'll be the moment where then finally they'll ask you the question, hey, there's something that you have that I want. What is this thing you're doing? Right. So I think it's more important. So that's the kind of like how to be it versus try and, immediately try and get them into something that they have trauma about. If they have trauma with a church, like you mentioned, Sandy, like the right place and space, it's okay. Like it's okay to go outside here for a little bit and then come back in. Like that stuff's okay.
I think there was Russell Brand asking which church should I go, something like that. And for me, one of the nicest experiences to go to church with somebody who love, or with a friend. So my advice for him would be, who is your Christian friend? Go with him. Because if you go alone, you're going to find a lot of proposition, and then for adults, we know it's difficult to make new friends and stuff. You go with someone that you already know, somebody that loves you, and you will be much more. You will immediately experience the participatory aspect of being in the church, because you bring someone with you to participate with you, so you are not alone with the rest of the people. That is so good. And then I was thinking that if I will ever have the opportunity to talk with Grim Grease, because he speak about Seth. I'm a millennial too, and maybe even more for Gen X. we had almost traumatic upbringing with Seth, sometimes in the place of the parent. But there is now Seth bigger brother in action, that is Net, and I think that we we are
That's
playing with Net,
That's
and
good.
we are playing with Net like Net is it's a more generous God than Seth in that sense, but he's more generous, but he's also more powerful, and he's more tricky because he in contrast to Seth is just listen to what I say, buy what I tell you to buy, vote who I tell you to vote, consume what I tell you to consume. Net instead is inviting us. I want to listen to you. Tell me your story. Come on in. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more about you. Give me some picture. Give me some video. Let's meet online. So Net is constantly inviting us to participate with him, with it, but at the same time is the mind control of Net is 10 times more powerful than what was said, because we are deceived in a way that our thought now, it's the deception really happens when we are convinced that we came up with some idea, when in reality it's someone else inspiring us that idea. That is the essence of mind control. So having said that, we are communicating in this space, virtual space, and we are socializing in the space. But I am more skeptical, like Baudrillard. He has a theory that the simulation of social simulation will just make you improve in simulating socialization. So when you are in a real situation with other people, even if you are socialized hundreds and hundreds of hours online, that will not translate automatically when you meet people in person. And we have plenty of evidence of it. The Gen Z and the younger millennial, they are totally comfortable online, but they are absolutely awkward when it comes to in-person interaction. So this is something that really we have plenty of proof that the internet socialization is not translating to actual real life interaction, good interaction and communication. So yeah, I wish that we should become more aware of the mind control where we are swimming in the while we are on the internet, while I put where is it there, virtually not alone in my tag. The emphasis is in the virtual, and what I'm striving in my life is to have an embodied experience of being not alone, from the most shallow to the most profound, and that's where I'm going.
I have a question for you both. Because this is like what you just shared, Tunji, that's kind of a topic that's all over the news right now, is like about, social media and stuff. And there again, I was listening to CBC. In Canada, the teachers' unions are planning on suing, or in Ontario anyway, they're planning on suing all the big, social media giants because they're ruining their classroom experience with their students, and they're taking them to task over it in that way. Where my question comes from is my background, my family situation again. So some of the things that I dealt with was that my ex-husband and both sons had some communication commonalities. Each one had them expressed differently. My oldest son is autistic. My ex-husband was dyslexic, and English is a second language. And my youngest son, technically he had a mixed first language, signing and English, and then got at 2 years old, dumped suddenly into an all hearing community where you only spoke English. each one of them had interaction issues with socialization with people. And for my children, TV and online things were a big part of their socialization, in part because of the deafness. The deaf community, when my oldest son Jacob was 2, said, get a closed caption machine. I was running around putting words, labels all over the house, for him to see what are things called in English. And so we bought a closed caption thing, and we would put things. He wanted to watch This Old House and everything building, loves building. So every show that had to do with wood, they were on and closed captioning. His brother got 0 experience in being a sibling. No interaction, no communication. Like the whole dynamic of a sibling of a child with autism is different. He would go to school, and he's a very shy child, so not good there either. When he hit middle school or maybe early high school, the thing came out where you could play your video games online, but actually talk to your friends while doing so. And so he asked if he could do that, and there was some kids that he was doing that with. So, and I would say, yeah, absolutely, go ahead, because I noticed that as he was doing that, where they were talking about a shared experience, but it didn't have to be tangible, he breathed a little more relaxed, so I used those things alongside of other things that we call the more correct way of doing it, and I'm just kind of curious, because I'm very afraid that what I'm actually hearing is people doing the all or nothing thing again, and I don't know that that's the right answer either.
No, I think that is true. Like, I think like everyone is unique, right? I think one of the things that's really and by the way, dealt with a child with autism too, Sandy. So I understand that nonverbal for the first 4 years, and then verbal but echolalic speech. However, there's a lot more going on that can't come out, So that's like people will think, because people will think that it really disconcerts particularly young kids, because they see a certain age and they think there's going to be a certain level of behavior, and then that doesn't come out. And there is a very childlike still, like there is a very simple way, but there also, I know there's more going on. So we all know that with each one of our children, you have to figure out your way to them, like what works for them. But I think that's for people too, and I think that's why it's a big part about listening to people's stories and seeking to hear them, and understand their story, and then trying to figure out how to relate and communicate with that person as they are individually, right? I think it is important. So there isn't a one size fits all solution to a human being. There just can't be, right? And so, what do you think, Tunji?
Yeah, that's because now there is the fact that the problem can be also a solution for something else. But the painful things with when even in children or whoever, you have difficulty creating a relationship. It's when you see this difficulty to communicate, that is more just to say things, but to have empathy, to have compassion, to imagine what the other person is thinking or feeling, to see the other person's feelings. This is the hard part, and communicate through with less friction. That is through a screen, with more safety. That is, again, the screen gives you some safety. For sure, it will it will help some aspect of communication, the verbal communication, the self-confidence. It is going to be helped through the screen. But at the same time, there is the point where in order to form a healthy adult person, it's necessary that you go through some friction. Normally you have that friction in a childish relationship with your little friend, a schoolmate. You allow some sort of friction to get to know yourself, your boundaries, and other people's boundaries, and where is the line. So those frictions are necessary to grow up and learn. So one of the problem of today is that somebody wants to eliminate all friction, eliminate every possible theoretical and real struggle for a child. But that's, of course, will create even more and more grown up that are not really grown up they're not emotionally or psychologically mature, because you needed that friction. At the same time, yes, I don't know really where it is the answer, because I really think that the simulation of the things, like in the virtual space, it's a simulation, and they cannot really give you that same effect that you have when you interact with somebody in person. That filter of the screen is so powerful that no matter how much I stretch my hand, I cannot touch you. You are completely safe in your room. I can only smash my screen, but your screen will be completely fine. And that kind of that impenetrability of the screen, it corresponds to the impenetrability of ourselves when we talk that. It really requires a person that knows already how to open up to the neighbor, then he can communicate to the screen. But if you don't know already that place where you are vulnerable, once you get to talk with somebody through a screen, through a protection, you're still closed up. But I may be wrong about that. I don't know.
One other interesting thing, I'll start by saying I learned some of this from my sons. I had the very black and white family, like everything is, don't ask why. When I tell you to jump, ask how high. Don't question things. Don't disobey. Obedience is everything. And what you were talking about, how important it is, that friction, and how we try to overfix things. We want to smooth everything out. I think Lance said, or one of you guys said, smoothing out. And I'm like, smoothing things out is so bad, because it takes all the tactile ability to actually feel that, like the boundary or the whatever, the definition of something is taken away, and you don't really know what it is, because all you've got is this this slide across the surface that doesn't give you enough information. And so what I was actually going to say after, sorry, that little prelude, was in terms of my oldest son that was deaf and had the autism, getting eye contact. So when you're deaf, everything is eye contact. And when you have autism, it counteracts that place for a lot of kids. And my son was one where even as an infant, I had a friend who said, watch this. And she'd go from one, I'd hold him up and she'd go from one side to the other. And whichever side she was on, his eyes flicked away the other direction. And just very, there were also some structural issues. He had surgery for some bone issues. But eye contact was very difficult for him. And when we would get him doing anything, whether it was a puzzle or Lego, whether it was tangible or video games in the screen, whatever it was, and you wanted to break into his space, that whatever that boundary was he had around himself doing his thing, he would blow up. And so I'm trying to, I have to have eye contact, and I'm trying to teach him to watch the eyes and the face and the hands. And eventually, one of the things that I did that minimized the friction enough, but kept some form of it there, was he could focus on slowly finger spelled words. Like, so I would go P for pause, and I would kind of slowly slide my hand around in front of the screen, and all that's there at the edge of his vision is the letter P for pause. So I taught him, I am not taking this away from you. I am not making you not. I am not, here's a framework in which I am interrupting you. And when he went to school, teachers are very much, this is how we do things. And some of them were always, he was blowing up in the classroom. And his grade 4 teacher said to me one day, she goes, come here, I want to show you something. And they would let Jacob at the end of the lessons have maybe 5 or 10 minutes, because he was so much quicker than the other kids in his class. He had communication difficulties, but not necessarily the same issues with some of the stuff as the other kids had. And so he would get thank you, you've done your activity, you've done what we've asked you to do. Now you can have 5 minutes on your whatever you're doing on the computer, or 10 minutes or whatever. And she would take a little sticky note, and she would say, it must have been long enough, because she would put a sticky note just at the top of the screen, and on the sticky note, 5 minutes, go whatever the next activity was, or lunch or break or whatever. And nobody would say anything except this note. You'd watch his eyes flick up and read the note. And then when they came over and said, come on, we're going to whatever, he's ready for it. And I thought she was genius. She found a bunch of ways to do what you're talking about, where she maintains that boundary friction, but in a way that allowed him to minimize the stress from the autism of needing to complete the activity, and it suddenly drops like a curtain. And, what do you mean it's done? I'm not done processing it, like that.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to point out for folks that are here, the normal timing, Nate is participating in a class that Jordan Daniel Wood is putting on, amongst others. Sherry and Nate will be doing their normal Grail Country Saturday morning live with poetry readings, and it will be at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's for me, that's 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. So for those of you who have tuned in and go, what the heck is going on, and you're looking for your normal Grail Country Saturday morning fix, don't be discouraged. It's coming.
I can read you a poem if you're really desperate.
What is that in Central European? It's in how many hours, how many minutes?
Depends where you are. That's why I said Pacific Standard Time and Central Standard Time. People are smart enough to go look up on the internet. And,
so
how many hours it is? What time is it now?
It's 11 o'clock now in Eastern Time. And you said they're doing it at what time in their time?
From here it is right now. It will be basically in an hour and 22 at 1 hour and 22 minutes.
That's what I thought. It'll be right when I'm going to work. So yes, an hour.
So, all right, I'll put it in here. Anybody else has been listening along, if you want to jump in, I'll put the invite in again. If anybody else wants to join on in, if not, might wrap this up pretty soon. I think, I think that's I think what you were talking there a little bit about smoothness and all these things, right? Which is like, we can't take all the hard edges away. of anything, because that's not life, right? You want to prepare your children to be prepared to handle adversity and learn things on their own, you know, and so on and so forth. But, you know, that also applies to us as human, like as adults. Like, we don't want to go through the suffering. We don't want to face the hardness. You know, we want to, we have to accept in our own lives. You know, there's a pill for that in America right now, where people just want to take a pill and hopefully that pill will fix whatever thing I have going on. And, you know, I'm not saying that people that medications aren't good and useful. At the same time, that's taking care of a symptom and not a root cause. And some things you just have to go into the fire and deal with it. And not, you know, one of the things I really love about 12-step programs, my sponsor had told me quite often, he says this a lot in meetings, but he's held this to be true, is that steps can look really scary. Particularly like the step that talks about admitting to God, to yourself, and another human being, the exact nature of your wrongs. People are very scared to do that. Like, it's really easy to pray to God for forgiveness, because that's in your secret place. That's just between you or him. What's really difficult is to then actually say that thing to another human being, right? And that seems scary. Also making amends with people. And some of these people might have hurt you. And he says over and over that these steps are not intended to hurt you. They're for your own good, right? And it may seem like doing these things would be really scary and hurtful and everything else. And I think some of the meaning crisis is for a lot of reasons, but I still see a lot of people struggling in their meaning crisis because they're unwilling to jump in and participate and take risks and get into the game, and they want to stay on the outside thinking about it. And you can also wallow in your own self-pity, and you can wallow in your own misery. Are you willing to get out there and do something about it?
I'm old enough.
There was a.
Oh, you go ahead first, Tunji.
I'm going to go to another topic, so maybe you want to say something first.
Just a quick comment, because it also made me think about the word suffering that we were talking about earlier. And I'm old enough that I remember the old songs and things where, you know, suffer the little children to come unto me, you know, and I thought, what a strange thing to say. And I'll hear the really weirdest explanations of what that means. But basically it means allow, or to tolerate in the negative sense of allow, or to, what was the other thing here? To experience something, to, you know, to be subjected to it, to be the subject of an experience. And I think that's why my brain jumped back there too, because that's what we've been talking about, is how do we still engage with the stuff, you know, and what does it mean? Like, because we're drawing all this stuff into ourselves. But that's it. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the topic of deconstruction. I asked a question to PVK, but I wasn't satisfied much with the answer. But some day after, he started having conversation like with Dempsey, and then there was the talk between Peterson and Schellenberg, and they had something in common about having a Christianity that is not, that does not require you to believe that much, or that you can participate maybe in the form without having to really believe in the theology, in the doctrinal statement. And they were arguing, and that it clicked to me a little bit after. But the future that even they start putting in a way of meta-Christianity, they are not talking about the future. They are simply talking about what has already happened in the last 50 years with boomers and Gen Xer. We already had a participation in Christianity where the people were not were doing the form without subscribing or even knowing what were the dogma behind their faith. So we already had that. That's not meta Christianity. That's just the liberal kind of Christianity that we already had for 50 years, and what has and that's why all the deconstruction that has happened is because you don't deconstruct the substance of a thing, you deconstruct the form of a thing. So the formality of Christianity has been now seen devoid of all meaning, and you question the meaning of the things that you and your parents were doing, and yeah, that doesn't mean much. So why I'm doing? I'm like, that's just not pretend anymore. But that's the construction. That's not whatever it is, meta Christianity. So we already know where this experiments lead. We already know where it's what is the fruit of LARPing as a Christian, or the performative, or the nominal, whatever. There are many words for the same things. Maybe here we can say LARPing. You cannot LARP as a Christian. And there is a yeah. Then the question why you cannot, because you know even the ritual, they are true in themselves. At least that's what I think. I believe is they don't need your validation to be valid. They are valid themselves. But why then you cannot LARP? It's because there is a God that will for each of every person that has ever lived is going to test if you are LARPing or not, and it will manifest in different way for each person. It will be a very different situation. It can be very hard, less hard, but you can be sure that if you are LARPing, your faith is going to be tested. And what results next is, you can call it deconstruction, but that's not deconstruction. That's simply the sifting of everyone's faith. You know? That's why we can argue about, yeah, you say you're a Christian, or to some other we can say, hey, he's a Christian even if he doesn't say he's a Christian. There is no LARPing. Everything is going to be tested.
It's interesting. Soon as you started talking about that, Tunji, where my pictures go. I don't know if it's my brain, my mind, or just that whatever's in between. But so I was thinking about the little buttons on the line below the YouTube videos, and it asks if you want to subscribe, and then eventually it asks if you want to join. And so you know, I've heard a lot of argument like around, you know, do you join the channel, or are you, you know, like, how in are you? Are you just in, or are you really in? Which is kind of what I'm hearing you saying with, you know, our participatory place with God. And whether you're going to join the church, are you actually joining the church, or have you merely subscribed to the church? Where, you know, kind of where are we on the continuum? And I think, to be fair to people, why? Like, I only recently joined 3 channels. One was because it was a friend and I wanted to support what he's doing and contribute that way, even though I don't participate a lot on his channel. The other was actually it's a Jewish history channel. And like I said, I love spending my time reading the stories in that section of the Bible. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm listening to people talking like they already know all this stuff. And there's a whole bunch of it I don't know. So I joined that one, and that let me listen to somebody talk about, lets me listen to a Jewish guy talk about history, basically. And I've always been terrible at history. I don't know that those joinings will be permanent, because in the nature of YouTube videos, if I can't afford them for like the next, 5,000 years, well, that's irrelevant. I'm allowed to, unjoin them. But in our relationship with God and people of God, we want to have a more intentional. That's what I'm hearing you say, is like, are you really deconstructing the relationship, or are you just deconstructing the form in which you were holding the relationship? And is that the same thing? And were you really even in it? And are we just kind of, it's like me saying I had to quit church so that I could heal, because I was so used to living the trauma in real time within the context that to actually separate the trauma from the context, I needed to be in a different context. I needed to be somewhere that I wasn't listening to all the normal stuff. And I'm listening to you going, yeah, like, nothing anywhere else in the world looks like when my parents and grandparents were alive. And nothing my kids are doing looks like when I was a kid. And this is a normal thing. The framing may change, but the context has to be something you choose yourself. And I don't know if I'm actually hearing you say that when you're talking about deconstruction and why you framed question to Paul and why you were listening to the other stuff. But you got me thinking about some of it.
Yeah, and to me, Tunji, it's a journey, right? So, for example, this just amazes me. So Gavin decides he wants to start following Christ, and he takes his young family, show up at this church, and within like a month of being here, they put this statement of faith in front of him and said, "Do you believe these things?" Like they're trying to get him to believe, like almost like immediately. It's like, how could you even come close to believing those things? Like that's just it's such a cart before the horse sort of a thing. The other thing I would say is, like, I think it's okay to act as if in the beginning, because how can you really have belief until you start living something to where then, God starts revealing himself and you start recognizing these things, so on and so forth. So whether you call it kayfabe or LARP or whatever, I don't care. Act as if right now, like just start doing these things, living this way. But that's talking about starting to embody it. I also think what happens is this is the age-old question. Jesus talked to the crowd, but very few people came in to become disciples, right? A lot of people come to church, but they're not living it, right? And that would be, we're on Luke's channel right now. Some people say people say things all the time that they say that they believe, but they don't really believe them because they're not living it. Like if they really believed it, your whole life would be transformed, right? And so, but I think all that stuff is good. Like Sherry talked about, there's a going in or the going out. Like I ultimately think like people who say they're going to leave, like this context you talked about, Sandy, like if you really don't believe, leave the church and go try something else. Like go out into the wilderness, try following these other things, because I ultimately believe what happens in that context is then you're going to go run into the very end of materialism or reductionism or whatever. And you're going to realize, well, this is all BS too. Right. And sometimes you have to go out to come back in to learn those things. But if you are a mature here, but I think it's exactly right. This happened to me. I've had my own failings that where I wasn't living in a fully embodied way. I found myself losing myself out into addiction. Right. And so like that it was, and I had other things. There were these proof texts that I really wasn't doing it, Tunji, so it didn't withstand the storm. But I learned from that. And then just like the prodigal, I could come back in then. And now I realized, oh, I was once this way doing this thing, and then this didn't work. So I think it's levels. Like if you're 40, you're 30 years in and you're still LARPing, that crisis is going to hit. Your spouse is going to die. Something's going to happen. A child, like there's going to something that's going to challenge you at such a deep level, and you're not going to be able to have the depth to handle it. And you're going to be exposed, but that's all okay too. Like, cause I think you need to have that exposed in you. And then if you come back like that's when you have a chance to get better. So, Um,
Hello.
I'm
hello,
gonna
Noah.
off because I've got half an hour to get ready before I have to start heading to work. I'll keep listening though. Thanks.
I don't know. I've been processing the meta modern Christianity stuff, and I think I'm falling on a slightly different side of this. There's a certain side where I don't know if his name is Brendan Graham Dempsey is doing a great job of kind of, he's not representative of this idea because it's in construction. He's kind of in the exploratory phase, and I've been kind of frustrated wanting to wrestle with that, and I haven't really had a chance to with like his presentation of all of this, because it seems very individual to his story, that like he wants things to be the way that would have been helpful to him, and that's totally understandable. But I did want to point out that like LARPing and nominalism is not one-to-one, at least in my construction of it. LARPing is like the opposite end of nominalism. Like nominalism is you're already in it and you're not following through. You're claiming to be a Christian, but you're living like everyone else. LARPing is you're saying, I'm just like everyone else, but I am going to act as if I am in the group, which presents a whole different kind of series of problems.
I think it's more honest. It's but not the people who are being consciously dishonest. Like I think you would, if you're being nominal, I don't know that you know that you're being nominal. And one of the beautiful things is like, so this would come out like Chad when he tells his story when he was trying to figure out how to pray, and then his sponsor gave him some prayers to pray, just some liturgical prayers, and he didn't want to do it. Like he's like, I don't want to do this, and he told him that. And then he even like, I think this is a BS, you know? So he's like pushing. So he was being totally honest about it. And then his sponsor said, well, just do it anyway. You know, there's a sense of like I think what you're talking about versus nominal versus LARPing, like there, I almost think there's a little more honesty in the LARPing and saying, I don't know if I'll do this stuff, but I'm being honest with you right now. I don't think I really believe it, but okay, I'll start acting as if.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a point about that. But I think that at the bottom of it, that is something that anchor you, that is the faith, you know. Even if you can say, even if I don't feel it much, even if I am not as good as I want to be, still I have faith in something that is beyond me, that is anyway holding me together, holding me close to him. So yeah, that's in the sense. Yeah, you can say that normally you have Christians that try to be good Christian. You know, that will be unfair to LARPing becomes kind of derogatory at this point, because what else are you going to do if you're a Christian but trying to be a good Christian? So yeah, so there is that distinction there. It's a very good point. I will throw there another thought that I have talking about modernism, postmodernism, metamodernism, and it comes to my mind when I think it was Dr. Jim, that at some point he was explaining the structure and the theory behind an artistic genre, and they were talking about the Western movies, and in the Western you had the pioneer with in the 40s, some great director, and then you have the peak phase with John Wayne and such. Then you have the construction phase where you have the spaghetti western, and then you have the parody when you have Blazing Saddles and comical things. Now this is a very real structure because it's it's a fractal. It's true because it's a fractal. It's applied to any level. So in the spaghetti western itself, that is the deconstruction point, you have the pioneer of the deconstruction with Sergio Leone and some more serious movie. You have the dollar trilogy, that is the peak, and then you have the more you have the parody then with Bud Spencer and Terence Hill. So inside every single thing is a nest. It's a fractal of the structure. I was thinking about the same thing about the modern, the postmodern, the metamodern, because okay, we are in this postmodern frame of thinking, and it is it is the deconstruction part of the we are at the deconstruction phase of the world. We are deconstructing everything. You relativize what was there. You're asked the question, what was the meaning of that? So it fits well with that deconstructionist point. Now some people are seeing the next phase, but I wonder if we are not just eating the parody phase of the deconstruction, the postmodern movement. And I can see that. I have an intuition of that, because you have things that were upside down turning the right side up now. You have parody of parody. You have that try to tell the wrong story but end up telling the right story, because we are at the point where we have the parody of the parody. I can make example in movies, but you have example of that in any way. So what do you think about that? Are we just in the parody aspect of postmodernism rather than because if we hit the next phase, we will not even see it until we pass the pioneer stage, because the pioneer of any kind of movement, they don't know that they belong to another movement. That will be accredited to them at posteriori, when you already you are in the peak phase of it. So to me, it looks like more that since we have the circle world, the circus going around and putting the right side up again, that we are just experiencing the parody of the parody of the deconstruction, that it ends up being for some people the things the right side up again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things that I'm grappling with myself, and this is something that this little corner has introduced me to, and it's the concept of people saying, you can't go back, and I get that, like you can't go back again, and so on and so forth. Totally agree with that. But you're talking about like this whole meta modern is we're moving to this new thing that's going to be developed. But I'm just sharing my experience, having lived in all the different forms of American Christianity, from mainline to contemporary service mainline to non-denominational, seeker church to house church or whatever. Is I'm wondering if, like, I'm deeply convinced that we were given a pattern, and there was a pattern of participation, right? And there is this revealed pattern, and that when I participate in these patterns of within my church life, that quite frankly also match in my embodied participatory patterns of the 12-step life. But the thing I'm struggling with is, like, you can't go back again, but what if there is the pattern that was given, and that's the pattern you're supposed to participate in, and that pattern is timeless, it's eternal, right? And so that's one of the things I'm struggling with when I have no doubt that we are heading towards a modern Christianity. I have no doubt about that, and it's going to play its way out, and there's new forms, and I think some of those new forms will try, and Sam made this point so well. Protestants are so great at seeing what works. Like in the West, we're really good in a business model. Like we see something that's working, that's pulling people in, or you see some attraction. people will figure out some way to, okay, hey, we'll do this thing, whatever. And what that looks like is you see more evangelical churches trying to take on patterns of like real presence Eucharist, patterns of like liturgical prayer, just different things, right? But this whole meta modern conversation, which I know is going to happen, like I'm not discounting that we're moving towards, when we think in a Christian context, we're moving to some sort of meta modern Christianity, and Christ will work through and in all those things. Don't get me, like I totally get it. Like Christ is everywhere present. He sees sincerity. He'll participate in all those things. But I just think that there are just true patterns and things that were meant, that are not of this world, that we were meant to participate in. And those are ultimately on the hierarchy, the highest order for transformation. They're the best things for us. And I just throw this out as an example. I never fasted before. It just was not ever part of my Protestant life. Maybe a day or something, we talked about it, but Jesus didn't say if, but when we fast, right? Right after the Sermon on the Mount, he said, pray, fast, give alms, if you can just shorten that down, right? And now I've come into this place where fasting, and I'm in the middle of the Great Lent, right? And you hit the wall, and still not till May 5th when you can, be non-vegan. And I don't like that. But I think there's this great wisdom in the fasting life. Like I think we were created to fast as some part of our journey, right? As a central part of those things. And so that would just be like a real tangible example of that I'm struggling with, that I'm recognizing this here now. And and that could be like showing us like, oh, you're going back again to this thing. No. I don't think I'm going back to this thing. Like I think this was a revealed thing that's good for us. And so how do we mix this old world? Like how are we going to mix meta modern with these revealed truths? Like I think it's really interesting.
I think there is a good analogy, a good biblical metaphor, that is the one of the trees. And if you see the Christianity as a tree, it's a tree that need, and as every tree, to be pruned, and they go through season, and it's a lot of leaves and few fruits. Then it gets pruned. There is not much of anything of it, and then new leaves and new fruits come out. But it's always the same tree. I will call it always Christianity. It's going through Christianity, from Christianity through Christianity to Christianity, all the way. It's not becoming the tree is not becoming a meta tree and a post tree or or a hyper tree because it's getting pruned, it's losing its leaves, it's producing fruit. Is the same tree. And it's true, we don't go back, but the analogy of the tree tells you that what is fundamental it always remains. A tree that is pruned is not uprooted; it remains firmly in the ground. And what is cut is what, according to the gardener, is unnecessary or unfruitful. So it can, if you have seen some fruit tree really get pruned, you can see how different and destroy it may look, or even to the point of looking dead. But the tree is still well alive, is still well uprooted, it still maintain all the fundamental part, and it still will grow in the direction, in the way that the gardener wants the tree to grow. So maybe we don't need a different modern updated language to define what is an essential aspect of Christianity itself.
Morning, Mark.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I only got a few minutes, but it was, I'm actually getting ready for a meeting to evangelize estuary to my pastor. So, so there he is. That's one level, right? It's a kind of sales pitch, persuasion process. But lots of things to think about. When we're talking about evangelizing in this era with this particular corner of the spiritual internet, because we're not even all Christian, right? So how do you this is a discussion for the corner of the corner of the corner. Historically, I think we're in a place that's probably more akin to the rebuilding of Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity. Sorry. So there is a lot of not knowing what we're doing while we're building. If you're not a stonemason, how well are you going to rebuild a wall? It's you need somebody with some expertise to come in and kind of help you. But until we have the experts, do we really know what we're doing? And then back to, okay, that's part one. Then there is this question of meta-modernity. I'm not convinced that term is even going to survive very long, because I'm not even sure what it means. But step back from that debate and just ask, where are we going? And if we have some understanding of where we are going, we're going to know what we're going to do and what we're going to evangelize people for. Because Christianity is brought us to this place because Christianity has historically, heretofore, been something of a mess. Catholicism is in crisis because of corruption and rampant sexual misconduct and the cover-ups that followed. That's a simple fact. They wouldn't be in this. They wouldn't be in the crisis there, and they wouldn't be trying to consolidate dioceses and whatnot were they not in a financial crisis because of lawsuits. The Southern Baptists have had a similar there's much smaller institution, but they've had a similar explosion of controversy, and they're not doing as well as they used to. And so on and so forth. Pentecostals are just a parade of embarrassments. Christianity has brought this on itself, would be my point. So we are sincere seekers and believers, and covering a wide range from the Noahide to Orthodox to Protestant to Catholic. And I think we're returning out of the captivity, coming to Jerusalem and seeing Jerusalem's a mess. So we're all trying to reach, how do we start rebuilding? Well, you pick a spot. You've got a 5-mile long wall, it's all down. Well, you pick a spot. That's where we're going to start building. And I think we're lucky to have somebody like Paul who has something of a vision, and he's said, I'm going to work on this corner of Jerusalem. Doesn't mean there aren't other corners to be worked on, but and we're kind of going, okay. It took me a couple of years to kind of get onto his vision, and I'm like, okay, I'll pitch in with what I got, and but that's not been an entirely intellectual process either, because for me, it's very much been a spiritual process. Jesus brought me here, I could say. And so when I evangelize people at this point, my vision of evangelization right now is just to stay out of the way and let Jesus work. To stop being an asshole and let God be. I mean, be in me, and then let God work in that person, and I'll just kind of, where I can help, I'll help, but not to push and pull and try to. I don't have to sell them on anything. I'm just going to be what Christ wants me to be in the moment, and hopefully that will radiate, and that will be the gospel embodied in me will resonate with other people. And if anybody wants to find out what I did, I can share it. but I'm encouraging you to go, if you feel a leading, go with it, so on. So that's enough rambling. I'm sorry. It's I kind of can't stick around for very long. I'll listen to whatever comments you got, and I hope that resonated with somebody.
I think that's really good. I think that's it. And I think I always think about Christ in that moment. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I needed clothing, you gave me clothing. What is that person right in front of me? What sort of love and service do they need? And provide that. Not what, not that, if you need a fish, I'm not going to give you a stone. And I think sometimes proselytizing or sort of those sorts of things can be that case. Is like, how can you be with that person in that moment to be the love that they need? And then I love it. Like, the whole thing is you just trust enough in God that, like, he does the calling, the choosing, the convicting, like he does all that stuff. You just need to stay in step with the Spirit, so to speak. So I think that's beautiful, Mark.
Wow, did I drive him out?
You already had
No,
to go.
he knew he's getting ready to go talk to his pastor about starting an estuary at his church. So that's pretty awesome. So Luke, I think you wanted to comment about a Tunji comment.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah, I didn't
could.
read I've been not reading the chat, so that's it's another
In
screenshot.
fair warning to people, we got to clear the airwaves here by within 45 minutes, probably. Well, earlier than that. We can't go longer than another 20 minutes or so, because Grail Country will be coming on with its regularly scheduled programming of poetry with Sherry and Nate and others. So I encourage you to stay. This is the lead in to the next sitcom, so to speak. So hopefully you stay tuned moving forward. So come on in, Luke.
All right. Oh, we did it at the same time. We're adding Trey. What up, Trey? Yeah. So the thing, I mean, I don't want to be. I was saying kind of jokingly in there when you were criticizing me about my etymological bullshit, that I don't have to. It's a bad character trait, and I realize it's like an insecurity in myself to have to defend myself. And even the impulse to defend yourself when somebody criticizes you, again, that's the very thing that I'm criticizing often with other people and myself. So with all of that as a caveat, I get it. I think when I'm streaming, I will tell you what it means in just a little bit. My daughter's confused about my writing. She's like, that's literally, or that's actually illegible. There you go. That's the proper usage. It wouldn't literally be illegible unless I wrote
disconnected.
out that it's literally illegible.
I missed everything that you said because my my connection cut off. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
you have to tell me again.
that was
defending
all
yourself.
Wasting time bullshitting. So the thing with, so I would agree, like even saying suffering is to undergo, which is a thing that I got from Jordan Hall. Like I didn't even have that realization until he said that, but that's what it means in its origins. And I get your point that like in our common experience and in our colloquial use of the word to suffer, like that's not a positive connotation. It's a that undergoing whatever is not. It's viewed. If you ask anyone on the street, do you want to suffer? People aren't just like, yeah, all right, I want to suffer. That sounds awesome. Or our own experience of suffering isn't positive. But what I would push back on or challenge, at least in this intellectual discourse, firstly, I don't want to deny anyone's experience or feelings or anyone. Because if you're in a conversation with someone and someone's like, I feel this way, or this is my experience, or like this suffering is hard for me, it's a really shitty move to come in and just be like, well, Romans 8, God works all things for the good for those who trust in Jesus Christ. Like truth bombing people doesn't help. So that's not what I'm intending to do, but I am trying to make an intellectual point, which is that I think the proper use of the mind or the nous classically is to is to speak to your passions, your automatic, impulsive, animalistic emotion, and speak truth to it so that you can reorient yourself to a higher good that you're maybe incapable of even living in the current moment. And I think for Christians, what that means is a realization that even Christ was made perfect by what he suffered, and also for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, Hebrews 12. And also the verses that say, like, Christ endured suffering. You think you're not gonna? How do you think this salvation thing works? That's what's saving you, is that undergoing. And so I guess I'm just saying all those things from like a intellectual point to try to help all of us reorient ourselves toward that thing that I think is true, while not simultaneously denying the fact that we all hate suffering while we're in the middle of it. We do. But that's just because I don't think that we are, I don't think that we're yet living out that Hebrews 12 kind of mentality that Jesus was, but that's the goal, I think. Sweating drops of blood with the foreboding of the pain and the cup that we have to endure, but yet with faith and trusting that that is our good. I mean, who wants to do that? That's the whole paradox of
Yeah, but that is something that I've been trying to argue, is that what is for our good is not necessarily good in itself. There is a big difference in that, and with great ramification. That even Jesus, I mean, it's in the Garden of Gethsemane, he didn't want that, because the cross sucks. It's the worst things that a human being has ever come up with, and nobody will decide something like that. And Jesus says, that things in front of me sucks very much, but if it is your will be done and not mine. So, and then he give us example through that, and he give us example through the prayers and our Father, that we ask the Lord to not to deliver us from the test, from the trial. He invite us to always to knock us his door, that we may, if we are thirsty, we may receive water and everything in. So we are. The fact that God used the bad things for our good doesn't make the bad things good. That is. I mean, and that's, I think, is the difference between. That's why I am not a universalist, for instance. It's because I think that God is not responsible for evil. I think that there was human angels that sin, we sin, and we and the angel that rebelled are responsible for evil. It's not God that is responsible for evil, but God used it through His grace. He can use even that to bring up His good purpose and redemptions. But we do not celebrate bad thing. We do not celebrate that. Christianity is not a death cult. We are a resurrection cult, not a death cult. Yes, that is. We go through that. Through that, we go to the other side. Yeah, but we do not celebrate that. That is evil. Is bad. And suffering is bad. Suffering is. If God could transform us, if we will be enough malleable to be transformed without suffering, God will not. We will avoid a lot of suffering, but because we are so stubborn, and sometimes we are so proud, we are so sinful. There is the sinfulness of sin. We are so sinful that the suffering, that the consequence of it is suffering. That suffering is redeemed by Christ for our own salvation. But that suffering does not come from God. It's a consequence of sin and evil and human and not human sin. And the fact that God is making something good out of it doesn't make it good. And that's the point why I see that there is a place, an eternal place for it, that is separated from the new heaven and new earth. Because that evil was not a fault of God. Because if God was responsible for it, yeah, we have to find a solution for the problem of God being good. Then we need to have apokatastasis, because God was responsible for everything. But that's not that's another issue, I guess.
I think
All right, right. Simultaneously, my daughter's talking to me. So I'm gonna have to go again because I gotta take someone to dance. But yeah, I don't. That conversation. What is in that conversation? The problem of evil. Like we've spoken to our Jewish friends about that too. Like it's a like Nate and Yosef and Chezi often talk about that. Is like there's a distinct difference between at least some strains of Christianity and Judaism in regards to good and evil and its origins. It's a complicated discussion. Isaiah, I, the Lord, create Ra, disorder, chaos. God sends out demons to mess with people. St. Paul says, I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake. St. Paul, he says it Colossians 1, I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake.
Yeah, for his sake. But that's the problem. Again, you go one step forward from the beginning of the things.
So yeah,
God did not make we cannot accept the theory that God made the devil to sin and humanity to sin. That's not the foundation of the redemptive story.
Well, I don't think, like in a simplistic way, God made someone to sin. I don't think God makes someone to be good. I don't think that's the way that God works either way.
According to Genesis 1, God made everything good. He created everything and it was good. It was good. Made the human being and it was very good. And then the story goes on and something bad happened. Nominally the sin. And that's
from where? Where did that come from?
From man, from
where? Just out of nothing? Man created evil himself out of nothing?
But we can go philosophical and define what exactly evil is, and I don't think that it's necessary that we define what evil is. But the fact that, that's also the problem of our free will, and the fact that God has created us with enough free will and angels with enough free will, and that's, in my opinion, what it is also to be in the image of God. We can choose. We have you as an Orthodox, you know that you have some participation in the in the grace, in your salvation, in the grace of God. So you have to know that, that is the foundation of it, is that you have the capacity to some good, and at the same time you have to some capacity to some evil. And the consequence of our evil is all the suffering that is the world since the fall of Adam and Eve.
Well, gentlemen, I gotta go again. Sorry to pop back in and pop back out. It's a really long conversation. A lot of good grist for the mill, and I enjoy the dialogue. But I gotta go, and I mean, we're not gonna solve it. But
well, actually, I think this would be a great conversation for you and Toons. Like this single thing here, you gotta go have this conversation is a long conversation. I think it'd be great to engage this because a lot of good comments are coming.
Well, Chad's been encouraging me to do that. I need to have just conversations on topics instead of just live streaming and monologuing. So, all right. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.
Well, hey, guys, I think it's about time we need to clear the airwaves for at the bottom of the hour, 30 minutes from now, the Grail Country Poetry live stream, Sherry will be jumping in with Nate, amongst others. They encourage people to come and participate. So, but before we do that, Trey, I just wanted to set that out there, the expectation that we'll have to log off here soon. Trey, you have jumped in and have been super patient and have been listening. What would love to hear what brought you jumping into this live stream, Trey?
Well, the question is preaching. And I spent 6 years knocking every Saturday on everybody's door. So I think I'm the guy on this, at the very least. And I did think it was funny how Luke immediately said, "Put me on your do not call list." Probably from a preacher, probably from a Jehovah's Witness. Which, yeah, I don't know. So I wanted to talk about that. Sort of because when I hear regular Christian preaching, no offense, but it just doesn't seem as serious or as like as demeaning, I guess to say. Like there is very little as demeaning as knocking on a bunch of doors, getting door slams, getting the worst like looks, and doing that over and over and over again with the expectation that there's going to be no return. Mostly you're doing it for the sake of doing it. And but I think it transforms you and it makes you a completely different person.
As someone who had to go knock doors, I worked for I was a financial planner, and the way we did things was we went and we knocked. We had to make 30 good contacts by knocking doors every day, and then you followed up with them. Like rain, sleet, or snow, we were out there. I mean, man, I'm telling you what, knocking doors is hard, man. Yeah, I think that's incredible. What so you say that, and also I think that's a very lived, embodied, like in the game sort of a thing, because I know how hard that is to do. Like, what do you think that produced in you that you think is different than what you when you hear just preaching about something?
So I think that there's a transformation. So I noticed that there was a big difference between the younger, like Joe's Witnesses, and the older ones. And the older ones had a completely different style, and the younger ones didn't. The younger ones, talk about like they would go and knock to a door and say like, "Do you think you're gonna die today?" Or "What do you think about death?" Right? And usually they would have that shock, and that shock would have a reaction, and it would go somewhere. But the older people, maybe they would like have a presentation, but they'd just be like, "How's your day?" Or they would be like, "That's a nice dog you have." And I think that they sort of realized that like, yes, some conversations would come up about it, but I think that they would. I mean, it depends. It depends on how you look at it. Like, are they being manipulative by having more normal conversations, or are they genuinely interested? And I do think that the older people, um, they didn't believe anything would really come of it, but they enjoyed human interaction and at least trying to show a part of themselves a little bit more genuinely. And I think that's how like actual conversation would go, is you sort of have this like different stance where you sort of show the absurdity of it. Like I noticed people would be like, "Yeah, it's pretty weird that I'm coming on a Saturday morning, but I like your dog. What's your dog's name?" Oh, blah 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 blah, back and forth. And I think that a makes you like, any witness could be in a like, could be a public speaker if they wanted to. And I think it's a, to finish it off, I would say it's an interesting mix of being presentable and explaining all your thoughts clearly, with also trying to really show how to be genuine.
Mm-hmm. And so did you say you were Jehovah's Witness when you were door knocking, and are you still a Jehovah's Witness? Or
Well, I wouldn't be able to talk to you if I was Jehovah's Witness, but
okay, there we go.
yeah.
That's right.
The short and sweet of it is, I was born secular. I converted at 16, and then I left a year and a half ago. So
Yeah, so I was talking in a voice chat over on the Bridges of Meaning with a guy. I won't say his name because he's I don't know what the exact words is. Is like he's kind of disappeared and he's away, but he hasn't officially come out publicly. But he's helping people transition out of Jehovah's Witness stuff because it's kind of like Scientology that if you make it public, then you can't talk to your family and some of this other stuff. So there's all these challenges that he has. So obviously, you're willing to be separated from the group by being willing to come out here and talk publicly. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are you at now? Are you a seeker? Or do you think, because he talked about a lot of people deconstruct and like go totally away out of Christianity because they're burned by it. Other folks are trying to find their way back in. And so, he's actually found himself back in, he became a baptized Christian, and he's helping people connect back in that way and dealing with the traumas of stuff of coming out of that. So I think that's fascinating.
I mean, I think it's complicated for sure. I think that's the easiest way to sort of explain it without like going into it. But I think that I think as I was sort of making the decision to just sort of jump, I think I could, I could look at the different possible paths. I could look at the person who, spends most of their life criticizing the witnesses for good reasons. But, I think that like the idea of letting go and saying like I should love my enemies even though they don't love me or they persecute me, I'm like that seems like the way to a good life. And I think that the more I hear bad stuff about witnesses, even talked about it here, I want to really cheer for them because like I think that I am somebody who when I reflect on the experience is that there is two sort of people. There is the person Trey before the witnesses and then Trey after the witnesses. And those are two fundamentally completely different people with two different life paths. One I would say would be way worse if I didn't join. And like, like I I was really not good talking to people. Like terrible. Like the idea of coming on a random stream and talking to somebody would never appear in my mind. But like they train you in that. They train you in that and you get really good at doing that. And now you can talk to anybody. And having the ability to talk to anybody, that's like gold, to approach anybody. And there's a bunch of other things that like transform me. So yeah, I think I just like what I'm trying to do now is just sort of recognize the good with the bad and not have like a monarchical view of how bad it was.
Yeah, interesting. So I've seen your name's familiar. You've been around here for quite a while, haven't you?
Yeah.
Making comments and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So obviously clearly you're interested in exploring the topics we're exploring because you've been around and been commenting. So that's awesome, man. We've never talked before, have we? I don't think
no,
so.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you jumped in. Noah, I always need to invite Noah because Noah's an introvert and he very patiently and calmly listens to everyone.
I enjoy listening.
He does. He enjoys listening. So as we're coming up kind of towards the end here, are there thoughts that you've had with all this meandering we've done?
I mean, there's been a lot, I think. Man, to change the subject a little bit, like going back to the suffering stuff, I don't know if I understand everything in the same way. When I hear suffering, I think of sacrifice, and that has a very different dynamic than just pain. It's about letting go a little bit. And then what came to my mind was the verse, the lamb slain at the beginning of the world. That this idea that sacrifice was not just a thing that happened because of the fall and because of sin. It's something that was way before that. That it's actually an essential part of the world, and went all the way to the top and echoed all the way down. And so maybe I just have maybe my frame is completely off and I'm thinking of something entirely different, but that's just where my mind went. But I've also been thinking about this proselytizing thing, and I am kind of on the side of, I don't know what is being talked about here exactly. When we talk about like orthodoxy and proselytizing, what I tend to think about is trying to convert Protestants for the most part. It's usually what it ends up looking like. And when you talk to Protestants about proselytizing, usually it's not about trying to convert Catholics or Orthodox. It's usually trying to go to people who don't believe in Jesus. And I haven't seen that in like an Orthodox or Catholic context very often, of trying to go out to somewhere that doesn't have that that relationship with Jesus. I brought up a story that I have some friends in the country where I can't even talk about what country it is, but they're trying to convert people to Christianity and having these conversations. And the Orthodox Church around there is actually reporting them to the government because they don't want to face persecution from the government for the actions of this other group. And so, I don't know, that's just been some kind of difficult kind of processing, and like, that's just another angle my perspective on this whole conversation is coming from.
Noah, have you seen Sherry and Jess Purviance is on his channel? Have you watched their series on Job?
I haven't yet, no.
It's really good. And Tunji, I think you bring up great stuff. Like, this is like the depth question about suffering. Like, and so what Tunji's talking about is he's proposing big questions, and those are important things. But no, I think Sherry and Jess, I mean, if you think about a lot about Job's journey is wrestling with this idea of suffering, right? And I feel like they've spent a lot. Jess has been ruminating on Job for probably at least over a decade now, so he's really deep into it. I think so that'd be something I think you might be interested in. And again, we're getting to 11:11, so we're getting close. We need to wrap this up. But Matthew, you came in here. Seems like you wanted to say something. But okay. Good that we could see you working. So, all right. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for jumping on. Luke, thanks for starting this. And Nate for bringing this over to Grill Country. I will be the good host and say, remember, bottom of the hour, they're coming right back up with the poetry live stream. So tune in, Trey. Nice to meet you. Hopefully we see you jumping on. Noah, it's always amazing to talk to you. Tunji, I'm super glad you've joined this little corner. I think you think about things very deeply. And I always enjoy hearing from you. And I like Matthew. Matthew he's here, man. He's participating every day. So everyone have a good day. We'll see you at the bottom of the hour.
We're good.